What an excellent start. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Sharon Carr-Brown, and I'm going to start by asking Sinead to read the housekeeping notice.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of your nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the in the front car park of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume completely down on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have any apologies?
Yes, so we have Councillor McCrow and Councillor Slade attending online.
And I have also received apologies from Councillor Cooper. And do we have any substitute members?
No substitute members, Chair.
Thank you very much. So just moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any in the room who need to declare any interest for any of the items we're going to discuss this evening? You're doing it too.
Thank you, Chair. I have a declaration of interest in relation to item 10. I have a family member who's in receipt of home to school transport. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. So moving on to the minutes. They've been circulated. Do we have any questions, or can I take it that they are accepted as a true record of that meeting? Thank you. And as a follow-on from that, we have the action sheet. And I'm proposing that we note the action sheet for now, but also that we remove the closed items. Okay, thank you. And as an addendum, if you like, to that, I wanted to welcome Pearl, who is joining us from the Parent Carer Forum. One of the actions that I took away from a previous meeting was to invite the Parent Carer Forum representative, and they have very kindly accepted. And so we have Pearl, and we will also have Louise, I nearly said Lisa, Louise, who will come to the relevant meetings on you're going to swap. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you. So this is Pearl. Thank you very much. And that moves us neatly on to public issues. Sinead, do we have any public issues and questions for this evening?
Yes, so we've received 3 questions and 1 statement from Mr. Sofianos. So if I could just invite you up to read out your first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Question 1. The Key Lines of Inquiry paper is an important work, and I thank councillors and officers for coordinating it. It tells indirectly the story of SEND, from overstretched services to under-supported children. And beyond the council experience, the situation is even worse, with many children waiting years to access diagnosis, struggling daily with their mental health, experiencing systematic unmet needs at school, only to be excluded from their community because they were deprived of the support which they were entitled to under law. This is a multi-layered crisis, seemingly without end. It falls to councils to try to do the best they can, despite it. One overriding theme in the inquiry is, how can the deficit be reduced? Does council agree that it's just too big to significantly reduce, that service cuts won't deliver it, and that only wide-scale government intervention can achieve this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adam, for your question. I would also like to thank you for the recognition and understanding of the situation as demonstrated by your question, and agree with most of what you say. I said most, actually, probably more than most, especially the bit that you said it falls to councils to try to do the best they can. As always, we remain committed to improving outcomes for children and families with special education needs and disabilities in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. A recent Department of Education review recognised the significant progress that we've made locally, strengthening our partnership, improving governance and restructuring our SEND service. These steps are laying the foundations for lasting improvement. But like many councils, the demand for SEND services and the cost of delivery far outstrip the funding available from central government. This continued lack of government intervention to address the growing dedicated schools grant deficit and the current system that has generated and is perpetuating it is not just a local issue. It's a national crisis that requires urgent action. Without fair and sustainable funding systems, councils will be forced into impossible decisions with devastating consequences for children, young people and families across the country. That is why we are calling on government to act. Every child and young person in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole deserves the support they need to thrive, and that cannot happen without immediate reform to the SEND system backed by sustainable funding model. It is also why we commissioned this report to understand why BCP Council is experiencing a higher deficit than similar authorities to endorse a package of improvement that includes early intervention, strengthened education, health and care plans oversight, expansion of local vision and improved dispute resolution. These actions are designed to improve outcomes for children and young people with SEND by reducing demand pressures and deliver better value for money by investing in what we really makes a difference.
Thank you. Back to you, Adam.
Thank you. Question 2. The data for suspensions and exclusions is heartbreaking. Sanctions here are above the national rates. Preschool meal children are excluded 4 times and suspended 6 times more than other children. Those with SEND support are excluded 6 times more than peers. Children with EHCPs are suspended 8 times more than peers. The report shows a vastly disproportionate impact on our most vulnerable children. It underlines the urgent need for earlier intervention, faster diagnosis, better awareness of trauma-informed practice, and a culture of inclusion embedded in all settings. There are schools which already embrace these cultures, such as my local primary, Highcliffe St Mark's, which, despite the same funding challenges as others, battles to support and develop vulnerable children. How can the council use its best examples to encourage and support improvement across the conurbation? Thank you.
Thank you again, Adam, for your second question. We recognise the dedication and commitment that our local schools demonstrate every day in supporting our children and young people. We have several networks which allow schools to share best practice across the conurbation. For example, head teachers, SENCO and attendance forums. We also hold an annual education conference, and at the last one, which I attended, a local head teacher shared how they enable children to develop a sense of belonging to their school community. There was also moving input from practitioners from other areas of the country explaining their journey to become totally inclusive establishment and the impact of a sense of real belonging has on their students. There's more details of this in the Chloe paper that's coming up. We also connected to regional and national networks, which ensures we can bring the best practice from across the Southwest and the country to BCP. We are currently establishing a BCP Education Partnership Board, which will further improve collaboration across the conurbation. The published suspension and exclusion figures are always out of date by the time they have gone through due process and are made public available. It will be interesting to see how they change over the next few years as these practices are enacted.
Thank you very much. And I believe there's one further question.
Question 3. The agenda papers don't break down sanctions by school, but the government's data does. The release of 2023-24 statistics showed that 5 schools among 100 in BCP gave half of all permanent exclusions, and 6 schools gave almost half of all suspensions. 1 school gave 1,148 suspensions in a school year, the equivalent of 6 suspensions every single school day for a year. In that time, I read of local children suspended for having a period panic in class, isolated for having a short haircut, sanctioned for being unable to afford school uniform, and countless SEND children reporting unmet needs. Budgets might be impossibly restrictive, but school cultures shouldn't be. Yet there are few ways to hold schools to account. Would the committee consider inviting representatives from some of these schools to a future meeting to discuss how cultures impact children, especially the most vulnerable?
Thank you again, Adam, for your question. There are several ways in which we support schools in understanding performance and approaches to alternatives to suspensions and exclusions. These include data sharing and the utilisation of this data to target support and challenge. Data sharing also allows for robust discussions through several networks, for example, through the Head Teachers Forum, SENCO's meetings, and targeted attendance meetings. To strengthen challenge further, we are developing an education effectiveness framework and education partnership board. We need to be careful not to oversimplify these statistics, as we have a complex mix of different schools within BCP. The next bit is sort of more answering for this committee. Okay, I'll let you do the last bit then. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Adam. And I have brought this to the committee. We have had a discussion, and of course, it's an incredibly important area and issue that you raise. And we also acknowledge the stresses and strains on schools and what they are dealing with, and the stresses and strains on parents. We think that, yes, inclusion is obviously a key element of any response that we build towards the central budget recovery, as well as being an intrinsically important issue for every single child in our conurbation. And we would like to, in broad terms, we'd like to seek to understand more about this and hear the views of schools. However, we need to do that within a scrutiny format. We have a committee here that has particular ways of doing things, if you like. We have to show that our test and challenge is there for the right reasons and it's carried out in the right way. So what I'd like to do is take away your proposal and we will discuss it in terms of our work planning and we will then scope it and see how we can deal with it most appropriately. Thank you. And I believe there is a statement.
Sorry, yes.
Oh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. With the government's SEN reforms delayed and services under colossal pressure, children's rights are under threat and families need your support more than ever. There are concerns that the government will spend less money, that children could have less legal protections. And some in politics are apparently using this moment to attack and delegitimise vulnerable children. Reform Deputy Richard Tice recently claimed there's a crisis of overdiagnosis among neurodivergent children. Reform leader Nigel Farage has claimed Britain is massively overdiagnosing mental illness problems, and even claimed neurodivergent children were being diagnosed by GPs over Zoom. These comments are ill-informed, divisive, destructive, and offensive, and should be condemned. This is a dark time for vulnerable people. I urge all councillors to support SEND families, to use their voices to support the retention of children's rights, and to take that message to government itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sofianos, for that heartfelt plea, and we hear you loud and clear. Right, moving on. I'd like to invite the members of our Youth Parliament. We have Elliot and Ryan with us this evening to give us, I'm sure, what is a jam-packed update on their latest activities.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a busy time for me, especially at the national level. As you may have seen, Ryan and I finally got the chance to speak in the House of Commons just under 3 weeks ago. Knowing what to expect and wearing a bright coloured jacket, the Speaker spotted me. I spoke on the issue of unpaid internships, talking about how they impact low-income households disproportionately and create a two-tiered system, a topic which came up within a focus group I ran with the Youth Forum. And Ryan spoke on his knife crime event with the aim to inspire other members to do the same within their constituencies. Also, after a hugely competitive selection process, I was appointed to the Youth Select Committee a few months ago. The Youth Select Committee is a formal parliamentary committee of 12 members of the Youth Parliament who are appointed by the National Youth Association, where we write a report on a topic for the government to respond to. Within the committee, I proposed the topic of standardising the PSHE curriculum due to my own experiences with the differences between different schools, and also so I had a chance to embed some of my campaign around financial literacy and universities information. The idea was adopted by the committee and was taken forward as the focus of the committee. We just concluded taking written evidence, which I also hosted a session with the BCP Youth Forum where we wrote and submitted a statement. Next week, I'm travelling up to Westminster for 2 days to take oral evidence from organisations like Ofsted and even the Minister for Education. There'll be a formal launch of the report in March, and following that, the government is legally obliged to respond, so hopefully it will lead to some real legislative change. And now over to Ryan.
So yeah, between now and the last overview and scrutiny has been my tackling knife crime event on the 1st of October, and originally we wanted to do it on an earlier date, sort of near summer, but we had to reschedule for schools, and it was quite a difficulty straight from the start of getting schools to try and attend. But eventually, the 1st of October was a set date that we had to go ahead with. And on the day of 1st of October, unfortunately, 2 schools pulled out of the 3 that were attending. But as we knew it had so much potential as an event and something that could carry on forward, we agreed to carry on with the quick conversations with the one school that was going. And yeah, so it ended up 10 young children from Oak Academy attending, as well as Tracy from Changes Are Made and the police force, which were specifically the armed response and the dog units and local police. And during the event, we got to see some of the police in action, as you see in the video, as well as play a game of rugby with some of the rugby force, as well as the children. And we got at the end a powerful speech from Tracy, really helping putting that context into why they were there and help them bring home that positive message. Overall, the aim was to spread awareness, challenge misconceptions that people may have of their local police, as well as break down the stigmas that they might have with local police as well. So overall, the outcome was that it went really well, and there was some really good and positive conversations and interactions between the police, as well as Elliot mentioned, I spoke about it in my House of Commons sitting, I was really excited to speak specifically about knife crime because I wanted to encourage that it is really cool to take part in these national things, but bringing it sort of local and helping create positive messages by just small events like this and spark that flame between my fellow NYPs. And sort of created a format for other NYPs. I think organisation, it went really well. Just was really unfortunate that the two schools pulled out, but for the children that came, it was a really, really positive experience for them. And they said they were keen to hold their title. So hopefully we'll get that carrying on. That's the event as a whole.
I'm going to try and share
Yeah.
a video.
Sorry, we got a video from
Just a little tiny bit of.
Hello,
Oh.
I'm Ryan Cornish, member of the Youth Parliament, and I'm here.
For the benefit of the live feed, we're just sorting out some tech issues.
Hello, I'm Ryan Cornish, member of the Youth Parliament, and I'm here at Oak Media's Rugby Club to set up for my Tackling Knife Crime Together event. I have the police force here today, and also have the changes are made, getting set up and ready for today, for the schools to come in.
Excellent work. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Do we have any questions from the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Wow, you guys are incredible. Like your dynamism, your energy, your passion, the opportunities that you are seizing to use this platform to do some good is so, I'm in complete admiration of both of you. So amazing, well done. I wanted to say as well, just your point, Ryan, about you sort of said there it was a shame those, some of the teams couldn't come. I think something I've learned in my many years on this earth is if that you can make one difference to one person, then you've done a brilliant job. And that's, there's so much positive that has come out of what you've done. And I think that's fantastic. So focus on that, absolutely. And I just wondered, the question here is about any follow-up work. So it sounds like a brilliant event. We got a snippet there. Will there be any further follow-up with the young people that you spent time with?
So yeah, as you said, I feel like it made the experience as a whole really special for those 10 children that actually did come. And moving forward, I mean, obviously I'll be out of term next year, but it is something that a lot of people, there's an appetite there to keep it moving forward from the partners such as Changes Are Made and the Police Crime Commissioner. So, as the finish for my term, I want to, facilitate some of those conversations and really try and keep it moving forward because it is a really, really positive event that can really make a change.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just wanted to say that actually last Friday I happened to go to Oak Academy to see what's known as a fake presentation. I don't know if you've seen that. It's put on by Dorset Police on about knife crime essentially, and also other weapons, but it focuses on knife crime. And as it was Oak that came to your, I just wonder if actually you prompted them to make that connection, and that's why they ended up having that presentation. Because I can tell you that for that hour, the year 10s were completely spellbound, and they learnt more in that hour than they're going to learn in a very, very long time, and certainly more than they're going to learn on social media about the dangers of knife crime. So thank you for doing that. And if anyone gets a chance to see the fake presentation, or if it's, you know, if you're allied to a school or you're a governor of a school and perhaps they're proposing bringing it into your school, I can highly recommend it. It's incredibly powerful, but I think it hits exactly the right note. Right, so thank you for that, both of you. Excellent work. As Emily said, it's always inspiring to hear from the pair of you, so thank you. So that moves us on to our items of business, and our first item on the agenda is actually an update from John Coughlin, and I'm actually going to propose that we postpone that to our January meeting, where it will, frankly, it will sit better with the agenda on that meeting, and I just would like the agreement of the committee, or if anyone has any questions about that. But can you agree that, please? Okay, thank you very much. In which case, we move speedily on to item 8, which is our Chloe paper, looking into the high needs dedicated schools grant expenditure. And this is a request from the committee to benchmark to help us understand the strategic direction of the dedicated schools grant, and how we can tackle the considerable, well, the extraordinary overspend that we're currently dealing with. And so I believe I have Lisa here and Nicola to present the paper, and Tanya, I apologise, and Tanya to present the paper, and obviously then we will follow with questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I realise there's a lot of information in this paper, but we did want to try and give as much transparency to the answers to the questions that you raised in the Chloe as possible. And what I'm hoping is that you have a sense in there, yes, of the scale of the challenge that we face, but also the strengthening relationships, strengthening partnerships, including commissioning partnerships, the real focus on early intervention and system leadership in the space to try and do things better for children and young people at an earlier stage, which of course then also has a positive impact on the finances. So I'm not for a second sitting here saying that there are simple and easy answers to these questions that you've raised, but I'm hoping we've provided quite a lot of food for thought.
Does anybody want to add anything before we go into questions? No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. I did ask that the intros be kept short because I was aware that we would have a lot of questions following on from this. So I am now in the hands of the committee. Who would like to kick off with getting into the debate? I'm going to look at Emily.
I always wait just in case there's somebody else. I'll go with one question first, if that's okay, and then see where it goes from there. So Mr. Sofianos, in his questions at the beginning, put it really well. This is a multi-layered crisis seemingly without end, and that's exactly what it feels like when you look to other local authorities in the same situation. And without wide-scale government intervention, how is this ever going to be solved? And knowing that we are not alone, there's other local authorities in this, and I know that's been spoken about a fair bit, about sort of looking to good practice, working together. I just want to know, and maybe this sort of sounds quite naive, this question, is there any way, how can we work alongside those other local authorities to join our voices so that when we are shouting at government saying this needs fixing, is there, I don't know how to put this, succinctly, but can we do more in that space? Can we somehow, more of us coming together, make a louder noise? Like, I just feel if we're all in our little isolated islands with these issues, learning from each other and trying to improve, we know the big solution here is much higher. Did that sort of a question, sort of not a question, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Kathy.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's a really pertinent question, because individually we sound small voices, but collectively we can make a louder submission. Some of the complexities for each local authority might be slightly different, but in the main, in terms of what we're all trying to manage is the impacts for children and families, and that's exactly the same. Obviously, we are working hard with other local authorities or looking at other best practice, and we do this across a number of things. And so there's a regional SEND improvement group. We do peer challenges. So that's the whole of the Southwest region, local authorities. We do peer challenges, we do conferences, we have very detailed data and performance management that we are doing as a collective group, which is supported by the DFE. So some extra funding came down for the region to support improvement collectively together. Then some of that work is reviewed on a national basis. So there's a children's improvement board. I sit on one of the subgroups. So there's a national group, and then I sit on the subgroup for that. Then we also have the ADCS, that's the professional body for children's services directors nationally. They're also working with government, and they're also working there to try and put forward the thoughts and the ideas from both the profession, but also from children and young people. We also have to remember it's a wider than just local authorities. It's also the DFE, CQC, so health colleagues as well. So I know from a health colleague side, they are working very much collegiately with us, but also looking at best practice. And then we also work with the LGA, the Local Government Association. So they bring us together and we all discuss about all the commonalities, and they make representation to government. And then I also think, but Nicola might be able to tell a bit more, but the 151 officer also meets with other local authorities and has discussions about the challenges around the finance. And so I think there is a real move to try and resolve this together and support for that wider national impact and complexity to be made representation to government in a variety of ways. But also along the way, we're all picking up best practice. So there is a lot of work that happens in that, but yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. That really was helpful. Can I ask what the position, so we know the white paper that was meant to be coming in autumn, can has been kicked down the road. What have local authorities been told about that? What do you know about that? Either what it might contain, when it might be expected, or is there just nothing?
So it's expected in the new year, but it was expected quite a few months ago, and that has shifted, but we're keeping everything crossed for the new year. And there is every indication that the focus within it will be on support first, early identification, early support systems that don't leave children without, and don't necessarily lead to that point where families feel that the only way they can get support is through an EHCP. So the direction of travel sounds as though it's going to be a positive one, but of course the devil will be in the detail.
Thank you very much. Do we have any? I have a whole load of. Oh, Lisa has a question.
No, I'm
not sure who's going to answer
I've
it.
just remembered the other part of the thing that I want to point out that is what we're hearing is that as with much of the direction in terms of government policy, it's around multi-agency teams in locality areas, wrapping around those locality areas, whether that's wrapping around schools or wrapping around families or wrapping around communities. That multi-agency approach closer to the communities that they serve is coming through in pretty much all of the central government policies, and we would anticipate that that will be the same for this.
Okay, our portfolio holder, Richard, has a question, or is it an answer?
No, it's
an
just
answer.
to
Apologies.
add to that answer because just to make so that we're aware that I have meetings that mirror that with the political side of it. I'm part of the Southwest region, organised by the LGA. We have regular meetings. It's one of the things which I bring up, and it has been discussed there to try to galvanise people. Really, I sometimes do feel that some local authorities is a bit like penguins and sea lions. You know, they all shuffle at the end. You wait till one drops off and see if the sea lion eats a penguin, and if they don't, they're all happy to get in. Some local authorities, I do sometimes feel, are wanting us to be the first penguin in the water. However, I've been convincing people that no, they're going to be the next penguin. If you see what I mean. And likewise, funny enough, after the announcement about the declaration about it being put to the spring, because we said in the new year, the spring, we actually, strangely enough, had a meeting with one of the local MPs very soon after the next few days. And I did ask, in the government's mind, when is spring? And we didn't really get an answer to that, but I did also make it very clear for the situation that we're in. But I think us as politicians also have a lot to do here, don't we? We have to make sure that everybody who's listened to us, we tell, and it's not a party political thing. This is it. I think, you know, from every colour in this room, we all understand the same thing, and we don't want to blame on this, but we want a solution, don't we?
Thank you. As with all of these things, I had a number of questions, but it's difficult to sort of necessarily hone in on the right question to ask in these situations. Early intervention is clearly the key, but also we said about the multi-agency working, and I just wondered, are we doing everything we can in terms of joint commissioning? I'm interested to know just a bit more about the joint commissioning and how it's developed and improved in recent months. You know, what is being done differently? What's the direct impact on budgets that's having? You know, because that feels like certainly one of the tests of our partnership working. Yeah, so joint commissioning, please.
So the local area partnership has moved towards a more strategic and integrated joint commissioning model that balances contributions from education, health and social care. We are improving the governance around that and the service quality. And this approach is reflected in the recent plans, for example, the establishment of a joint commissioning partnership. So that integrated governance and collaboration in that joint commissioning partnership means that they meet every 6 weeks, developing a strategy and an action plan. There's commissioning accountability that's embedded across all governance levels. And health and local authority teams, there's much more co-location in place to enhance that collaboration and also to reduce duplication. In terms of finance and data, there's a collaborative joint strategic needs assessment specifically focused on children and young people with SEND, so that enables commissioning priorities to be aligned with the information that comes from that joint strategic needs assessment, otherwise known as JSNA. I'm not a fan of using acronyms, but that might be familiar to some. And then also new market management protocols so that we can improve provider performance and service quality. And then in terms of budget impact, so the integrated commissioning and use of pooled budgets is leading to efficiency gains. It's enabling us to redirect funding towards specific high needs areas. So, for example, the way that we focused our energy around speech and language provision. We're using digital dashboards, kind of real time in terms of the monitoring and oversight of those commissioning activities, and that all leads to more service efficiency.
And what's the sort of projected bottom line of that? I mean, is that a you know, what are we saving? What's the money tied up with that?
So
what's the business case, I guess?
So the difficulty with stripping it out one particular element and saying what financial impact will that one element have is that unfortunately it can't be answered quite in that way. So all of the different aspects that are being worked on, commissioning being one of those, should lead to reduced number of requests for education health care plans, reduced or increased number of young people who do have EHCPs being supported in mainstream settings, reduced number of children and young people in alternative provision, particularly long term, and reduction in number of children and young people in independent, non-maintained special schools. But all of the different approaches that we're taking will all lead to those things being successful, which in turn then will lead to an improvement in the financial picture. We've got a lot more work to do in terms of the financial modelling of that, which will come through in the deficit recovery plan. That will be part of that deficit recovery plan, that we have detailed modelling, cost and really clear cost and volume modelling that enables us to give better and more accurate projections. But it's very difficult just to take one element and say that one element is going to equate to this much financial improvement. It's everything in totality that will lead to that.
Right. Thank you. So I'm wondering what needs to change with our engagement with schools, because it feels like it's been quite variable over the years. And are we there? Are we there with our engagement with schools to get that sort of narrative across the piece? I mean, we've heard about sort of exclusions, and we know that the effect that will have on our pupils, and particularly our SEND pupils have elevated numbers of exclusions, considerably elevated numbers of exclusions. And I know that you're introducing the sort of cluster model for targeted funding. Thank you. And I just wonder where, you know, are we there yet with that sort of narrative, if you like, across the borough for how we make a shift? Because we can say it's a national issue, because it is a national issue, but we cannot be, you know, we're not impotent in this either. We have to be taking our own measures, because even if, you know, a debt gets written off or whatever, we still need better systems in place to pick up from wherever the white paper leaves us, for example.
Thank you, Chair. I think the relationship and collaboration with schools is vastly improved from where it was, and there is an openness, a willingness to share with us. The fact that we have 100% of our schools data share with us, in and of itself is such a step forward. But the fact that we're then able to have really meaningful conversation with our schools about that data, that we are able to collectively look at those challenges together, and our schools are responding really positively to that. They're responding really positively to being system leaders and partners in what is a complex and difficult space. And I think that's a huge positive. And if you take something as basic as our request for them to participate in leadership learning in relation to inclusion, and our promotion of 50 places on that course, which is a year-long course, so it's no mean kind of feat in terms of the commitment that we're asking school leaders to make to that leadership development programme. Those 50 places went straight away, and more schools came back saying, can we have more? So, you know, that's just one example of the difference in the way that schools are working with us. And some will feel that they have more capacity than others to be able to give to the collaborative space. But you know, they are there in the in-year fair access development space, in the 3-tier alternative provision model work that we're doing, as just 2 examples of several where they are working really collaboratively with us. And whilst you know the data that's been presented to you today doesn't always show the impact of that yet, these things take a considerable amount of time to shift in terms of seeing that impact. We are seeing some early positive signs in the suspensions and exclusions data so far this year, but it feels almost too early to say that. And the nationally shared data, which was referred to at the beginning of the meeting, is obviously now quite old because it isn't shared nationally. It's quite lagged data that gets published nationally. So that was 2023 to 24. But I think that the way that we're working with schools now is absolutely the right way, and I have real confidence in that continuing now.
Yes, of course.
What sort of, in that collaboration, you're talking a lot about schools. What about the academy trusts that these schools work within? Are they engaging with you? Because I think they're driving an agenda which might be about pupil numbers. Parents are attracted to schools where there aren't issues such as poor behaviour or and sometimes schools are directed by their executive heads or even the academy group.
So the trusts work with us as well as the school leaders. So we've instigated a chief executives termly meeting with all of the trusts. So that's their space to be able to work with us and to make sure that we have their buy-in to the priorities that we've identified as a local area. And then the Education Partnership Board will take that on a level as well once we've got that in place. So it's not just the head teachers who are working with us, although obviously they're the ones that have to deliver at the chalk face. And so it is really important that we enable them to be able to do that by working with the trust leaders at the same time. And actually several of those trust leaders and directors that they have within their trusts are on those collaborative working groups that I've been mentioning, and that some of which are described in the papers today. So I would say that's going in equally the right trajectory as it is with the head teachers.
Thank you. So I think probably maybe my last question, sorry, is, so you talk about data, and I'm just wondering if we have, and have we as a council adequately invested in literally the IT systems and the IT structure right across the piece, whether it's in, you know, admissions or transport or whatever it might be, to ensure that we can both be as efficient as possible, but also have the partnership working that we need to have, 100% data sharing. But, you know, because I'm speaking from a position of ignorance about what these things look like. But yeah, have we got the systems that we need, or the programme of investment to bring them in good time?
So shared across BCP and Dorset, we have the Send Dorset Intelligence and Insight Service, which is known as DICE. That dashboard provides notification in relation to a number of significant health areas for the partnership to be able to look at and that are reported up into the SEND Partnership Board. We use Welfare Call, which is commissioned to monitor the attendance and attainment for our children who are on a school role outside of BCP or in an unregistered alternative provision. And that's the same system that we use for our children in our care and our care experienced young people. Then we use Synergy, which is a comprehensive education management system, and that works across a number of areas, including our SEND casework. We are currently investing in improvements to that system in order to be able to have more accurate information. And we're also doing some training for our teams in terms of using it, because obviously a system can be wonderful, but if it's not input into well, then you end up with out of date and inaccurate data. And because we have had some churn in our staffing, we think it's really important that we do put that effort into the training to use the system well. And then the final part, which I think I may have mentioned in a previous ONS, is in relation to the AI support for education, health and care plan writing, which will enable us to spend more time being focused on the quality assurance of those plans and the good communication with our families.
I suppose I would add that we've got a data sharing agreement with our schools, which is supported by some of the work that Lisa's already mentioned with our data and insights team. So our capability in terms of our performance management, our routine performance management, has significantly improved this year. And it means that we can have meaningful conversations around the data. And use data dashboards to inform those discussions and hold our partners to account, and have discussions which are totally led by the data, and interventions and support and challenge led by that data.
Yes, Emily.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking for a bit of reassurance here. So sort of thinking as a parent of young children, former teacher, all those sort of things, hearing that EHCPs are going to be written by AI, I'm sure it's a very robust, wonderful system. I would like a little bit, so if someone was listening in, that sounds quite scary, doesn't it? Because EHCPs are meant to be incredibly personal to that young person or that child. So I just would be really interested to hear a little bit more, what does that actually look like and mean? And also when that will start to come in, if not already. Thank you.
I completely understand that nervousness around that. So that's why I use the word support the writing. They don't write the EHCP, they support the writing. So obviously the practitioners are writing the reports that then are the relevant sections of those reports are then pulled into the education, health and care plan. And that can be done by AI rather than a human, who would take, on average, it takes about 6 hours to pull the information together to write an EHCP. And the AI writer can do that, pulling together of the relevant sections in an hour. It's then still the responsibility of in our local authority, we have the ECHOs, the Education, Health and Care Coordinators, who are then refining and shaping that. The voice of the child and the family are taken directly from what they have told us, so that doesn't change. That's still absolutely using those words, and actually we're shifting our practice to write the section A directly to the child. So that all requires the skill of the ECHO to be able to do that. But because the information has been pulled together for them onto the EHCP format in a much quicker way than they can do in a manual way, it gives them that time to shape it, and it gives them that extra time to be able to spend on good communication with the family that we know is still an improving picture for us. So please don't think that the AI writer writes the EHCP. supports the writing of the EHCP. I hope that helps reassure.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes complete sense. Is that something, and forgive me if it's in the report and I missed it, is that something that we have seen another local authority, like good practice somewhere else that you sort of thought, hey, that's a great thing we can do? And if so, I'd be interested to know who is using it successfully.
Yeah, we're behind the curve a little bit on this, to be honest. I would say most other local authorities are already ahead of us in this respect. There are a number of proprietary brands of EHCP writer that are available on the market. And we're in a process of doing the procurement to find the best brand for us at the moment. I actually heard a local authority speak about this quite some time ago, actually, before I was here, and they were talking to one of the forums that Kathy described earlier in terms of those regional forums that we have, and they spoke about the fact that they when they were doing their test and learn of this work, because they were an early adopter, they wrote an EHCP, the human method, the 100% human method, and then using the AI support. And then they put it through their quality assurance processes, and the quality assurers picked the AI supported version as the better version, and that they thought that had been the human written version. It wasn't. It was the one that had been supported by AI. And I just thought that was really reassuring for me at that point when I was trying to learn a little bit more about it.
Thank you. There was just one other area I wanted to just ask about, which is, and we have a paper later on, but it's for information only, but it is mentioned in here, which is sense efficiency. And on page 35, there's a sort of, I think it's a general, it's one of the sort of lessons to learn, as it were. It's in that section. And the BCP response is detailed modelling has taken place in relation to sense efficiency. Furthermore, BCP Council was already delivering both satellite and resource provision ahead of this becoming a priority from the DFE, which is really good to hear. And it's also really good to hear in the same stroke, we know that the white paper is likely to centre on early intervention, and that's something that we're also driving towards. But it says afterwards, the effectiveness of these provisions requires review. So I suppose first question is that happening? Is that something that's happening as it envisaged? You know, what's the sort of timeline on that review? Or indeed, it may be something that perhaps this committee wants to look at as part of the ongoing budget work. But also our post-16 provision. So I'm aware that we do have considerable numbers of post-16 in specialist provision. We're an outlier in that respect, and there's meant to be considerable growth in required provision for them. And so I suppose I was just wondering about understanding if we know whether we're supporting our post-16 learners well enough. I'm thinking also particularly about like sort of transitioning into preparation for adulthood, that sort of thing. And what are our barriers to our older cohorts taking up mainstream places? And do we have, what's our response to that in terms of what those barriers are? Sorry, that was a lot of questions.
So if I just start on the question of have we reviewed our bespoke provision, I just wanted to clarify first of all that our bespoke provision was in response to an urgent need for immediate places, and it called for an innovative model of provision that you won't find in DFE guidance. So it doesn't follow resourced provision or a specialist unit model, which is a defined model set down in law. So our bespoke provisions were very unique. They required the engagement and participation of our schools in a way that we haven't done before. And what accompanied the development of those models was a sort of an approach of learning as we go. and embracing that learning as we then commissioned further places as part of the round 2 that we've got now. So we did have service level agreements that support these bespoke provisions, and we've got a number across our primary schools that we will convert into resource provision models. And alongside that, they'll have an updated service level agreement. But just to answer, have we reviewed it? It's been a constant process of review, of refinement, to ensure that these provisions are meeting the needs of our children and families. And the feedback's been very good from our families with children in those settings. Their outcomes are good. I think what the focus has been, and part of the learning, is to really hone our service level agreements and our commissioning arrangements, working with the commissioning team to ensure that they're robust. And so when we do report on them in a formal way, which we haven't done yet, but when we do, we'll understand the impact in terms of the numbers of children that remain unplaced, say for instance, and we'll be able to quantify the impact according to performance indicators.
Sorry, did that deal with?
So that dealt with have we reviewed them?
Yeah.
In terms of post-16 provision, absolutely post-16 sufficiency is part of our SEND sufficiency strategy. But what we know so far is that we've done a little bit, but we need to do a lot more, and we need to accelerate our work and progress towards ensuring post-16 sufficiency. We've had more recently a very good news story in the opening of our Linwood post-16 provision at the former Ted Webster Centre. That's a really strong example of providing those pathways for young people, particularly those that do have additional needs, that are academically able, and those with moderate learning difficulties. And it enables a backfilling within the Linwood campus of provision for children with more complex needs as well. So we have been doing a bit. We're doing a lot more. And that's our focus of our updated SEND and alternative provision sufficiency strategy, which will provide a more pointed focus on those pathways, so that we have pathways and transition points at post-14, more availability of internships, and strengthening partnerships, working locally with our colleges to provide curriculum vocational offers that meet the needs of our diverse post-16 community, and that then focusing on reducing those children not in education or employment. So there's a lot to have hope and optimism on. There's been a bit that we've done. We need to accelerate the progress, and we've recognised that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? David?
Thank you, Chair. Just leading on from those areas, really. So I'm looking at, in particular, sort of page 41, which talks about the local provision expansion, which is, I think, what we just covered off there around sort of that, the facilities more locally that we can look at, which I presume was the Ted Webster building already owned by the council. Yeah. So I think across the conurbation, there's probably a number of buildings that are really not being used, as we've covered, as being reflected within the report, that there's a great opportunity to do that. I can think of two off the top of my head, one in Highcliffe, one in Christchurch, that I think we could really utilise for all the reasons that we've got in the report here around the opportunity to save money, not being the most important one, by the way. I think what's more important than that is to get those local children in their local communities without having to do the travelling, by making them staying within their communities and getting education close to home without having to travel so far. So I'm really pro this. I think it's fantastic, and I think we've got a great opportunity to do this. I guess my question is, realistically, how, given the budgetary constraints, given that you've got to spend money in these premises to get them up to scratch, to allow them to be relevant for children of whatever age, whatever need to use them, how high is this on the agenda? How realistic is this to accelerate this area of resource within our and provisions within our own owned remit of buildings? And are we going to be able to see this continue to go at speed, or is this something that's very much sort of an aspiration for the distant future? That's the first question, if that's all right.
I'm just going to say something first and then hand over to Tanya. The speed will be within the resource that we have available to us to deliver, and so we just have to be mindful that we can't work the miracles we might like to work in terms of pace, because we don't have a never-ending resource to be able to do that. So just it's for committee to just bear that in mind. But I'll let Tanya give a more clear answer.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, we do have a full complement of staff now working as part of the sufficiency team, which is really great news. And we've got a lot of expertise and experience within the team to be able to work with our local school head teachers to get them on board, promote that engagement with the plans that we have to increase the availability of provision. And I think that's really important when we're facing a downturn in pupil numbers. That's currently being experienced in our primary phase, and that's due to age through into our secondary phase in the next 2 years. And so really utilising that spare capacity within our school estate is absolutely critical and provides us with an opportunity. And so far that engagement, those discussions, particularly with our secondary school head teachers about the opportunity for alternative provision and specialist places co-located with our secondary schools, has been really positive. So we're really hopeful about what's around the corner and what we're developing as an emerging strategy now. But in terms of what we're delivering now, I think it's equally as exciting. We are looking at those sites you mentioned in Christchurch. We've had our leaders go out to those sites just in this last week. We're also across our children's centres, across BCP, looking at those site opportunities, working with the Corporate Property Board to ensure that any disposals are considered by children's in a very serious and robust way for the provision of additional specialist places, be that for post-16, early years, Dingley's Promise. I kind of want to say we're all over it, and I really feel that with some level of confidence. What it might not be is as quick as we want it across BCP, and I know our communities might feel some sense of frustration sometimes with the speed with which we can move, but it's absolutely critical we have the right provision matched with the right building and site opportunity, and we're looking at that for our alternative provision in particular at the moment.
There was a second
There
question.
was, yeah, thank you. So that's really helpful, thank you. And I guess naturally rolling off of what you've just said there in terms of staffing and its challenges, and I know that from what I can see on some of the metrics, that staffing sickness in particular is still a challenge. So how do we see kind of the realistically with the challenges that we have within staffing, is that affecting our delivery, or do we feel that we're still running it sort of where we'd expect to be for the staff that we've got, or are there still recruitment gaps that we're still facing challenges on?
So in the statutory SEND team was one of the spaces where we were working at quite high agency rates, and that was running at over a quarter of the staffing in those teams, and we're now down to 6% agency. We've brought on board a number of permanent staff into that team up to and including September this year. So we're really pleased with that, and we can see the difference that that's starting to make. So that stability of the workforce is really important, and we feel really confident that we've already moved in the right direction in relation to that. And as Tanya mentioned, we have full staffing in the sufficiency team as well, with some really excellent experienced staff in that team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm looking around, I can't see any other, there's nobody online looking to come in. So the recommendation, possibly the longest recommendation in the world, is that the committee use the information in the report to support informed decision making about the measures and actions necessary to improve financial sustainability. The committee is advised to endorse a strategic package of improvement that includes early intervention, strengthened education EHCP oversight, expansion of local provision, and improved dispute resolution. These actions are designed to reduce demand pressures, deliver better value for money, and align with an emerging high needs block recovery plan. The approach demonstrates that the Council is actively pursuing reasonable, evidence-based strategies to address the high needs block deficit while improving outcomes for children and young people with SEND. So my question to the committee is, do we endorse that recommendation? And equally, what do we do with it, as it were, going from here? Because this piece of work was a benchmarking exercise intended to take us forward elsewhere. So let's start with the first part of that question. Are we happy with that as a recommendation, given what we've read and what we've heard here this evening? How do people feel about it? Or do we want to amend it as a recommendation? That is in our gift. Okay, we are happy. Thank you. And has this prompted in anyone's mind, hearing the debate this evening, as to where this takes us next? Olivia.
Do we, if it is a benchmarking exercise, do we then need to recall it? We need to then look at it, you know, moving forward, because I don't want to just say, okay, well, that's how it is. We obviously need to come back to it. I'm not sure it's something we come back to regularly, but is it something we need to say, okay, that's all well and good saying that we're doing the right things, but actually do we then need to monitor that, you know, set a time frame for that?
That is one approach, certainly, but the idea was it was scoped across all the main areas that would impact our high needs budget deficit, with a view to potentially diving a little bit further into any one of them over the course of the next year, as a way of doing our budget scrutiny, as an ongoing piece of work, sort of morsel by morsel, I suppose. So this lays out where we are, with certainly a strong idea of the measures that are in place, so where we hope to be as well. I suppose what I'm asking really is, where do we go immediately from here? Where does the committee want to take this immediately? I'm in your hands. It could be that, because I understand this paper was, or is, there is a great deal in it. It is very hard to take as a whole. It's not easily digestible. I completely agree. So it may be that we need a little bit more time to reflect on what we do with it. But I am keen that this benchmarking exercise is not lost as a way of, as I say, progressing our budget work. So one of the questions, I mean, it depends on how we ask these questions and whether or not we ask the right question. But one of the questions that came to me was wanting to understand, or have, shall we say, an appraisal of the effectiveness of the early intervention measures being brought in under the SEND improvement and the high needs block deficit reduction plans. And do we have the investment that we need behind those sort of invest to save things that we're looking at? So that might be perhaps where we want to go in the future for our next look at this. That starts to break it down into specific areas. That's a suggestion to the committee.
So with that, because you're absolutely right, sort of when we were talking, sort of that whole idea of, we think in the white paper it's going to be about early intervention, that's been identified by BCP as being, you know, a key focus. To have a better understanding of what that looks like, for me, that's what I would like. Yeah, so I'm very happy with that approach, with that being something that we focus on. I think we do need to sort of refine what that looks like and what it is we're asking. Does it have to have that budgetary, like explicitly a budgetary implication as well at this stage?
Well, I mean, ultimately that's a decision for the committee, but this is pegged under a budget item that as a budget piece of work that the committee was going to do throughout the year. And so that's what I was, or when I thought about this piece of work, that's what I was aiming for. I think it's also true, though, that whatever we look at in terms of policy, so there's always a budgetary impact of any policy, as we know, but we're not for a moment suggesting that we don't look at this also from, you know, in terms of how this impacts our families and our children and all of that, because I would suggest that most good policy has the dual effect of being good for people and good for our bottom line. That would be, you know, the aim, I should think, of most policies. So yeah, I mean, I would argue for the budget lens, yes, but as I say, that doesn't mean that it has to be the only.
Does it? I mean, I'm considering it makes it considerably harder because we don't have the budget because it's been pushed back. It's making it harder to make that decision. I'm assuming we can't wait until we've got that information to kind of focus in on it. Does that make it?
Yeah, but I was thinking about the early intervention measures that have already been outlined in this paper that we're already considering doing. It's about trying to understand their effectiveness and making sure that we continue to assure ourselves around that. Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered if I could come in and help a little bit, if that's useful. My understanding when you asked for this report was that you were looking to get that sort of baseline benchmarking, which the officers have helpfully delivered, and you were coming at it from an angle of sort of gaining assurances around what is obviously a really critical area for the council in terms of the high needs deficit and all the work going on in that area. So I think, obviously, like you're saying, a huge amount of the work going on links to the budget, and I think you were had in mind continuing to explore avenues that all link to helping the committee to gain assurances that, in effect, as a council, we're doing everything we can to address this area. So that was my understanding of the overarching aim. And in terms of deciding what you do next, I think it's really helpful for the committee to give views here on where they might want to go, but I think we found it very useful to sit down with some key officers to scope what information there might be and what we could usefully do at committee with a report, bearing in mind that it is a massive amount of work for the officers to pull together as well. So I wondered whether the committee might want to give some initial views. They could indeed follow up with some views by email, having reflected a bit further, and then you could potentially delegate to you as chair to work with officers, come up with a scope for some further work, and then share that with committee for agreement, if that's a helpful way forward.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, it is. So I propose it as it were for the big headline around these early intervention measures. Do I have the agreement of the committee that I take that forward? do some scoping with officers, but that will be the first area from the benchmarking that we look at. Does anybody want me to repeat what I said?
Thank you. Not repeat. I fully agree with that. Yeah, the only other thing that I was sort of looking at, but I was really conscious, as sort of Lindsay said there, it's such a huge amount of information we've got, and I'm always so mindful about ensuring that we give the right direction that is a good use of people's time, and there's a reason behind it. And it always makes me a bit hesitant to suggest something in this forum, just in case, you know, I'm wildly off piste. So guidance from officers would be, for me personally, very useful. The only other thing that I just will throw out there, just as something you raised, on page 35, when we were looking at the creation of new specialist provision, and then looking at the effectiveness of these provisions requiring review that's been identified, I would want to delve into that a little bit more, maybe as something that we could take forward. So early intervention and that, for me, were the sort of two things that have jumped out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, we have further meetings, so it could be that specialist provision is the one that we earmark for our March meeting, for example, and I would be very happy to look at that as well. Okay, so does the committee agree to those? I'm actually going to take both now. Unless what I hear otherwise, I'm going to take early intervention measures for January and specialist provision for March, with the proviso that we will scope that with officers and we will understand better what exactly what it is we're asking for the January in particular, as I realise that the deadlines are quite tight in terms of in turning things around for papers for that meeting. Is that, do I have the agreement of the committee? Is there anybody want to add anything on that?
No, I guess we would welcome a steer fairly early on, and the timetable to deliver, because obviously children's social care, I thought we were, and so just making sure that we cover the ground that we need to across both areas. So it would be good to understand, to have the direction from the committee really early on, but also an understanding of the timeline in that with the other work that we might be doing. But yes, absolutely appreciate that.
Thank you. That's a point well made, actually. Of course, our January meeting should be given over to social care matters. So it may be that actually we are looking at March. Is that all right with the committee? Okay, we can scope this out and we can figure out the details. But I've got broad agreement from the committee. Thank you very much. Oh, Lindsay wishes to come in. Apologies.
Thank you. Can I just take us back to the actual recommendation that you discussed? Just want to be really clear. So the recommendation really is asking you to endorse that strategic package of improvement, but that in effect would be just a decision that you make and record. Do you want to just make that decision and record it, or do you want to say anything to Cabinet? Because it's not a recommendation to Cabinet, and we were discussing it in terms of saying it's a recommendation. So I wanted to be absolutely clear whether you want us to say anything to Cabinet or not.
So that is open to us to make a recommendation to Cabinet. And again, I'm in the committee's hands if they wish to convert any or all of that into a recommendation that I make to Cabinet. I'm not getting any indication. So I think this is not one that we are wishing to take to Cabinet at this stage. Okay. Thank you. So that's a recommendation back to our committee. Thank you very much. Right. Our next paper is, sorry, oh no, nobody's leaving at this point, are they? So I don't need to say, no, oh no, Nicola is. Thank you, Nicola. Our next paper is permanent exclusions and suspensions. And I think I'm coming to Tanya for this. Is that correct? No? Lisa? I'm really sorry. I have the. I can say I don't know why time. Thank you.
So we have had a trend in relation to suspensions and permanent exclusions, which is not where we would want it to be as a council. And much of the work that you've been hearing about in the key line of inquiry paper and also laid out in the suspensions and permanent exclusions paper talks to how we are working closely with our schools and settings to address that, and it has the same level of complexity as we have just been discussing in the previous paper that crosses over into SEND sufficiency space, into support for early identification, the ordinarily available provision and graduated approach, and all of that work around support first. So whilst the statistics certainly don't sit where we would want them to be, we feel that we have a clear understanding of that picture and we know what we're doing to address it.
Thank you very much. So it is over to the committee for questions and comments, please. Is Emily going to start?
Thank you. So when I was reading through this paper, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of statistics, and that's been mentioned, and that gets mentioned a lot, and that's super important. You know, that gives you a steer. We know the importance of data. For me, each of these numbers is a child, it's a young person, and I want to understand better because I feel we've got the what, we've got the why, we know sort of the big headlines of why these young people are being excluded. And I want to understand a little bit more about the conversations that happen with schools, head teachers, leadership, trusts, to really get to the crux, the nitty gritty of why this is happening, rather than just that was an instance of violent behaviour or that was, you know, whatever. I want to understand that better, and I appreciate that's a huge, big question, but I guess what I'm saying is I want a bit of a reassurance of that those conversations are happening. What do they look like? And then how is that used to inform the next step? So that's my first bit. And then the other bit, Mr. Sofianos mentioned at the beginning about culture and cultures in schools. And it's not helpful to say I've heard a horror story about this, but I would like to understand a little bit better about what policing is, again the wrong word, but how we understand how schools, their benchmarking process for what level it has to get to in order that there's an exclusion, and is there consistency across the schools? Because we've obviously seen as well that, you know, there's one school that am I 15, why is there such disparity between the schools? So I'm sorry, again, that's quite a lot of information. There's some questions in there. If you wouldn't mind sort of answering some of that for me, would be amazing. Thank you. And if you need it clearer, let me know and I'll try.
Thank you. It's that time of the evening where multi-part questions are not sticking in my head. So prompt me if I don't give you back what you were looking for. So targeted conversation with schools in terms of that support, but also challenges, a really important part of what we do. And I think that we had probably moved it, in the last sort of year to 18 months into a space where we were able to have conversation with schools in terms of rescinding permanent exclusions, for example, and we've seen some success come from that. And what we're moving into now is more of a phase where we can step in even sooner. The virtual school has very much led the way with that and has been doing that for a while, where they have targeted particular schools where they could see patterns emerging in relation to suspensions rather than exclusions. And they've worked really closely with those schools to reduce their use of suspensions of children in our care. and have seen some real success from doing that work. And so what we've done as what we've been doing as a service is to learn from that practice and to replicate that out, so that we are taking more of a proactive approach with our schools rather than waiting for them to come to us. We want to do some further development in terms of how we use officers like our reintegration officers in those kind of spaces, so that we're helping our schools to establish not only what the child or young person might need to be able to do differently at point of reintegration, but also what the school or academy needs to be able to do differently for that child or young person. And that's through the lens of really seeing any exclusion as a system failure. If it reaches the point where a child has to be permanently excluded, something has not worked in that system, and we just need to be really open and learning in terms of how we look at that. And to reassure you in terms of it being beyond numbers, as well as those targeted conversations that we have with our schools, we bring into our education and skills quality and performance monthly meeting lived experience of children and young people in all aspects of our work, so that we can understand what difference we're making for them, and where it isn't working for them, what that feels like for them, and what we need to do about it. And it's often, I think it's fair to say, some of the most powerful parts of that meeting every month, so that we can then take that learning and utilize it back in terms of our own practice and our own work, as well as our work back with our schools. So that absolutely does happen. I do think that part of it has to be about us strengthening what our offer is at that early intervention stage. So where schools are saying, we're really struggling, please help us, we need to be clearer about what that help is and can look like. And one of the questions that I think I was anticipating coming out of the first paper was in relation to our educational psychology team. So that early support that they're able to offer is really crucial, and it's so positive that we've moved back into a space where they are spending a proportion of their time doing that early support work and not just doing the statutory work. But we need to look at what other teams and what other ways we can give that support work at that early stage, so that schools don't feel like they've got nothing else to rely on in terms of being able to wrap around that child and support them effectively. And actually, I feel, especially with Pearl being here, it's a really good opportunity to mention the PINS project, the partnership. Now I've got to get it right, Pearl. Partnership for Inclusion of Neurodiversity in Schools. Because that is one of those mechanisms for helping to build school skill and capacity to be able to meet children and young people's needs, so that then they're not feeling that they have no alternative but to suspend or exclude that child or young person. And schools are reporting back feeling a really increased sense of confidence in that space because of the training and support that they've had through the PINS project. Part 2, benchmarking and consistency and disparity between schools, I think comes back to those targeted conversations, but also the whole group conversations that we have as part of the way that we do the data sharing, and actually the peer-to-peer challenge as well that happens within those head teacher forums that we hold. It's not just about us challenging them. They also take that opportunity to support and challenge each other in a healthy and constructive way. Obviously, it is in that each school will have their own behaviour policy, as you know, and it will make sure that that is in line with the DFE guidance. And it's not that we feel that any school is working outside of that in terms of their policies. But what we do is try and work with them on making sure that their policies are as relational and as trauma informed as possible. And so where we can help them shift those policies into that space, that's the kind of work that we're doing.
Thank you. That's all very helpful. It does feel, though, looking at the numbers, sort of the work's going on, but it doesn't seem to be reflected in the numbers. There's still, if there is that sort of peer-to-peer work, the consistency of approach, it doesn't look like that. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful at all. It just sort of, there seems to be a discord there between those two things. But I'll pause on that for now because I'm sure people want to come in and then. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, David has indicated.
I've not got an obsession with staffing, I promise. But I'm just thinking around schools' interaction with our teams that interact with what they call in the school Senkos.
Yeah.
How those relationships are they consistent? Are we consistent with our approach across the schools? Are we there for the schools and in terms of delivering what they might need in terms of those students that they're trying to keep in the school where possible? Are we as a council doing our part in that relationship? And I presume that's part of trying to increase the working effectiveness between the schools and the council. So where are we with that? And talking of AI, I should just put my garbled thoughts and get it to spit out a question in a much better way than I can actually do. And off the back of that, Lisa, you just talked about behavioural policies in schools, and each school has their own. And I'd be really keen to know a little bit more around isolations. So a way of maybe not suspending a student, not excluding them, but keeping them out of the classroom on their own. And I'd love to know if that's part of those targeted conversations with schools, or is this something that is kind of left to the schools and their own devices to have their own behavioural policies? So two very different questions, and yeah, I'd appreciate your thoughts, please. Thank you.
You're testing me today with these double questions. Okay, so Senkos, we have a well-established Senko forum that is supported by a variety of different officers. So, for example, recently one of our senior EPs supported some really positive conversation in that space. But I think that the next iteration of that is how we devise support for Senkos by Senkos. So our ordinarily available provision and graduated approach exists already as a document, and that's published online, and there's a version for our families. What it doesn't have in it at the moment is a kind of toolkit of resources that then helps to upskill and give confidence to Senkos to be able to deliver on that ordinarily available provision and graduated approach. And so our next stage is to develop that, but we're going to stick on some time from a Senko to work with a very experienced officer to be able to create and deliver that. And I think it will have much more credibility by being created in that way, so that it's support for them by them, if that makes sense, rather than them feeling that it's kind of created somehow at a distance on high from people who aren't working in schools anymore. In terms of isolations, obviously, there is DFE guidance that enables schools to be able to work in that way and utilise internal isolation as an alternative to suspension and exclusion. And schools are required to obviously keep their own monitoring of that use of internal isolation. They don't have to report that to the local authority. But it is standard for them to monitor their own, and it's the kind of thing that would be asked about in a school Ofsted inspection potentially, that the inspectors would go and visit that space, that they would ask about how much it's utilised, how much revolving door there is for certain students into that space, and what the quality of the curriculum is like when they're in there. So there is that monitoring that takes place. I think from our perspective, the important piece of work that we're doing that you will have heard reference to in a number of the papers this evening is the development of the 3-tier alternative provision, which is very much about how we can better support those children and young people through creative use of the right kind of alternative provision, and not a reliance or an over-reliance on an exclusionary space in terms of that internal isolation, that it's much more about what does the alternative provision curriculum look like for children and young people that might be struggling, might need something a little additional and different, not just because of they might not even have a SEND need, they might still need something additional and different at that time. It might be about the nurture provision that they require, and working alongside the Difference, who've written an excellent national paper on this recently, is enabling us to really make sure that our 3-tier alternative provision is really high quality in terms of what we create, and it's being co-produced with our schools. And we're also working alongside a really strong trust from beyond our borders to be able to give support and advice and guidance to individual schools and trusts as they develop the model, so that we feel like we've got a really good supportive way of creating that model that we would hope will result in reduced suspensions, reduced exclusions, improved attendance, reduced use of part-time timetables. But we would also want to gather some qualitative information from our schools about how that has shifted their use of internal isolation.
I think Richard indicated you want to come in on the end of that.
At some point, I'm scribbling lots of things down.
Okay.
Please.
Was there a follow-up? Okay.
Just only in, if I've understood this correctly, some of the data that we get is historic. Is that what we're saying? So when would you feel like we would start to see those numbers reflected in terms of all the stuff that I'm hearing? So the success around the rescinded exclusions, reduced suspensions, targeted conversations, lived experience, all playing part of that. When do you think we'd start to see those numbers improve, as far as your expectations around all the stuff that you're part of and happens that maybe we're not privy to as well?
So I think we're already seeing some positive signs in relation to attendance. I think we've got some bigger pieces of work to do that connect to the part-time timetables, though, and I don't think that we'll necessarily see the impact of that this year. And in terms of suspensions and exclusions, we may see some positive signs this year, but it's much more likely that we'll see a clearer trend next year.
Thank you. I know that Emily wants to come back in, and then I will come to you, Richard.
Thank you. Very quick one. Would you mind giving me a better understanding of what the 3-tiered alternative provision model looks like? I know it's been mentioned lots, but just for the benefit, maybe no one else needs it, but thank you.
So I can't give you every detail because it's being co-produced, and one of the things that we at the outset said really clearly to schools when initially their questions to us were, what is your model going to be? And we said, it's not our model only, it's our collective model, and it's what we collectively create. But what I can share with you is that broadly, Tier 1 is looking at that early outreach, intervention, packages of support while the child or young person is very much still within their school setting. Tier 2 might be about very short term turnaround intervention placements alongside further outreach to support the schools building their skill and capacity to meet needs. So that picture I was describing earlier of not just about what does the child need to do differently, it's about what does the system around them need to do differently. And then tier 3 is about packages of alternative provision that might need to last for a little bit longer and might need to support that child into their next phase of education or training. And that is an important part of the package, because our families are part of this co-production as well. And one of the things that they have fed back to us is that the idea of, for example, a 6-week package of support of alternative provision support is great, but the idea of that coming to an end after only 6 weeks is scary for them, and just feels like it's just moved the problem along. And we need to make sure we listen to that, and where a child does need something a little bit more extended, that we're open to doing that.
Thank you. I've actually got Simon first, and I'll come to you at the end.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a question on isolation. I think you've kind of covered that with your answer to David about whether it's recorded, and from what I understand, it's recorded by the schools, but not by anyone else, as it were. I mean, it strikes me as a possibly a useful indicator, in the same way that suspension can indicate whether people are heading towards exclusion, and greater use could be made of it. It also concerns me that it's, for some young people, it's probably more detrimental than it is beneficial to have such a I was going to say draconian, but I won't. Such a measure. Is there any way that we get involved in advising schools and helping schools with avoiding isolation, or is that not our, within our remit?
I think it's within the remit of the 3-tier alternative provision model to make sure that it has absolute clarity about what our impact measures from that are going to be, and that qualitative review of not just the hard data around suspensions and exclusions, but also how those spaces are being used and what shifts are happening from that, I think is a really valid thing to include as part of the impact measures. And that's something that I can feed back to that working group for them to consider including.
I just wanted to ask what I think is a quick question. Paragraph 16 talks about the rise in exclusions in special schools, and I just the sort of second half of that paragraph says, this may reflect, and I just wondered, what do we know about that data? Have we had a chance to review that? Because I know that our data goes through, what was it, the QPIB and something else. There's a couple of quality boards, I think, that it goes through. So do we know what is behind that rise?
So there was a jump between 2023-24 and then 24-25 in terms of exclusions in our special schools. So it obviously was of concern to us. But actually, when we drill into that, it's a very small number of exclusions from a relatively small cohort. So that because it's a small cohort, it makes the rate seem concerning. But we have to bear in mind that the special school cohort is a smaller cohort, and actually, when we drill down into it, we can see it's a really small number of children and young people. However, we are cognizant of the fact that we need to work with our special schools to make sure that they're not experiencing challenge in relation to meeting the needs of pupils who have increasingly complex needs, and making sure that they're not having a struggle in relation to meeting those needs. So and in terms of those exclusions, in terms of the reason they were, I need to be careful that I don't get to a point of identifying children and young people, because it's such a small number. But what I can share is that those were in relation to physical incidents rather than persistent disruptive behaviour. I don't like that term, it's the DFE term. So most exclusions in BCP and nationally are for persistent disruptive behaviour, which is where I talk about system failure, because it means there's been a long-term
issue there. These exclusions were in relation to physical incidents. I hope that that helps.
So more acute rather than chronic, as it were.
Very well put.
Understood. Thank you. So I think I'm now over to Richard.
Yeah, and actually that overlaps with what I was thinking of, and do excuse me, I've been right. It's more of a mind map I've been doing here, and I'm going to try to. There's things that have been said. I think and it's a bit of my vision as well. Working with schools is the most important thing, and getting a blame game going isn't the way you work with schools. It's not the way they work with us. It's not, and schools work within their system. And we need to understand that. And we also need to recognise that most of our schools are good and outstanding. Ofsted say so, and we need to recognise that. But one thing I would challenge is, at the previous thing, we mentioned exclusion due to poor behaviour. I personally don't believe that you do exclude it. Poor behaviour isn't the reason for exclusion. It's not managing reaction to trauma or meeting needs. And that's sort of really where we're at. I've written the word trust, and I've underlined it down several times here, because I think that's also the key to this. Going back, 4 or 5 years, this trust between BCP and schools and BCP wasn't there. Building on that trust and getting that working relationship is something which personally I'm seeing. I'm seeing when I visit schools, and I'm seeing it at meeting. And of course, the system is changing. I talked about the school working system because Ofsted is changing their inspection. Therefore, it's a sort of like there's a doors opening to be pushed at, and all these things are going together. The exclusions bit, the data, I did sort of hint to this to Adam's answer earlier on. It's, some schools do attempt to deal with reaction to trauma and meeting needs, and try to be inclusive, and sometimes it doesn't work, and therefore just saying that school has more exclusions and suspensions isn't really, it's more subtle than that. And exclusions, and we come to isolations as well, they're okay as long as it's being done for the benefit of the child. We went to isolation. It's a very interesting conversation about isolations. I've seen isolations in schools, both when I've been working and talking about it with practitioners. Sometimes isolations are just purely time in the sin bin, which is no advantage to the child. Sometimes I've seen isolations where actually the child is isolated, spends real quality time with the most qualified member of staff in the school, to do intervention work, to get them to get back into the system and engage. And it's all called isolation, and they're totally different things. But that's been done for the child and not for the school. So just a few random thoughts on that conversation that was going on.
Thank you very much. So do we have any other questions or contributions on this topic? What we are asked to do, we have a recommendation that members note the data presented in this report and endorse the continued development and implementation of BCP Council's strategic approach to reducing exclusions and suspensions. This includes strengthening inclusive practice across schools, improving early intervention for pupils with SEND and those eligible for free school meals, and supporting the delivery of the belonging strategy. Members are also asked to support enhanced data monitoring and targeted action to address disproportionality, ensuring that all children, particularly the most vulnerable, can access education that enables them to thrive. Are we happy to accept that recommendation? And in line with the previous item, do we want to do anything more with that recommendation? And do we want to send it anywhere else other than back to ourselves? Because this is the job of recommendations. They do have the power to do something, but only, we use them judiciously. Do I have any thoughts around changing anything in that recommendation? Are we happy to accept it? Emily?
I have no alternative wording, but I think so much good work is going on to address this, but it is still such a big issue, and I don't quite know where I'm going with this, but I do agree with the recommendation. I support everything that's going on, and I'm just going to scroll back up so I can see what I'm talking to. Yeah, endorse the continued development and implementation of the strategic approach. I just think it needs to be noted somewhere that this work is being done, but it's from a numerical perspective, a quantitative perspective, is it having the effect? I know it's too early. I know it's historical data. Is what I'm saying making sense? And yes, I will pause there with nothing more in case there's someone on the committee who is able to come in and sort of, I don't know if anyone shares my views and can speak to that. If not, I will pipe down. But just, I do feel, or I'm suggesting maybe we note that this is still a concern. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll pause, and if no one else wants to say anything, then I'm happy to.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable point, and I don't really have a problem with the words. This is still a concern, or this is an ongoing concern. Because I mean, again, anyone got anything else? How else they'd wish to phrase that? But I don't have a problem with that. Emily,
can I ask as well? And again, I'm sorry if I'm missing something. When do we remind me? Do we normally look at this similar report every? It's one of our annual ones, isn't it? So is it a case? Because I'm so conscious of the amount of work that you guys put into things, and I don't ever want to make recommendations that are not useful, and there's a reason and a point behind. But is there any value in bringing some form of update, or just a check-in at an appropriate moment in time in the future that's not too much work? I don't want a full report, no one's got time to do that, but just to give us the assurance as a committee that we are on the right path, and the brilliant work that's being done and put into place is having an effect.
I assume you're saying before next November.
Although I'm conscious we don't have many meetings and you guys have got so much to do, but I'm wondering if the rest of the committee see value in that. Is the work that's going to go into it worth the value and the continued monitoring of this? Or is it something that, in fact, these things do need a year now to take root, and then it will be a year anyway before we've got the data? So I'm happy for someone, I think Lindsay's in.
Well, that's what I was going to ask as well of officers, is what data would be available in interim and that kind of thing. But we also have Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. Again, if I can assist, later down on your agenda, you have some KPIs in a report, which are actually lifted from the corporate monitoring KPIs, and they relate to the levels of exclusions. And I'll just check the wording. There's one that is about reducing the percentage of primary school age children permanently excluded from school, and one relating to secondary school age children. So although this is submitted in a report to you here, they are included on the live data dashboard that is public. And we want to build members' awareness and use of that dashboard. So that's a measure that you can keep permanently under review, just so you have an idea of what's going on in the meantime, and pending any other update you might want to have into committee. So I just wanted to flag that to you. And also, just in terms of your recommendation, again, it's asking you to note and support a position within the recommendation, and that's something you can just record in your minutes. If you are to say anything to Cabinet, we'd always suggest that those are SMART recommendations, so something specific and measurable, etc., etc. So asking them to actually take some action, other than if you specifically want them to register a particular view that you have. So that's just some guidance I'd give you in terms of whether you make a recommendation or not here.
Thank you very much. That is very helpful. Is there anything in particular in this recommendation that we would like to pick out and send to for Cabinet's particular attention? Bear in mind, I will be attending Cabinet tomorrow morning anyway. Or do we just want to, David?
What's your view, Chair?
That's very kind of you, David. My view is that I am keen that we do have more of a dialogue with Cabinet. However, I am genuinely not sure that these two papers allow us to have that dialogue, because they are quite wide. So I think it's whether or not it genuinely, whether or not there is something within it almost that you want to pull out and highlight. And as Lindsay said, we're looking for, we're not just, I mean, we can just register an opinion with Cabinet, we can just highlight something with Cabinet, but it's much better use of everybody's time if we ask them to do something, as it's always better with any councillor, you get them to do something. But sometimes you just need to make sure that something is right under their nose, and that the issue is highlighted to them. So yeah, I think it is tricky with these two papers, but I am keen on the whole that this committee realises it has the power to take things further than just reporting back to ourselves, and that voice is heard perhaps more loudly across the council as a result. Emily.
I think there's value in Cabinet knowing that as a committee we have concerns that BCP is an outlier when it comes to this. I'm sure they are aware, but saying that again is, I think that's important personally. I think that's worth flagging. But it is, yeah, there's for me, there's no ask here. It's more an awareness piece. If that's...
I think there's probably something in the last sentence, perhaps. Sorry, I didn't look up them. Was anybody else wishing to speak? No. Because the last sentence is, members are also asked to support enhanced data monitoring and targeted action to address disproportionality, ensuring that all children, particularly the most vulnerable, can access education that enables them to thrive. So there is perhaps something that we could take from that, with an opening sentence around ongoing concern, and you said something which has just completely gone out of my head. No, it's gone completely out of my head, but you did just have a few words that I thought could possibly sit in front of that. As I say, just to highlight the council to Cabinet, then gives me an opportunity to reflect the nature of this debate to Cabinet tomorrow morning.
There's that sentence, strengthening inclusive practice. When we're talking about exclusions, that's the complete opposite of being inclusive, isn't it? Exclusions are not inclusive. We are making sure that someone is not a part of something, and whether or not, for whatever reason that is, that inclusivity for all, especially the vulnerable, that's something that I think, for me is really important.
Yes, I would agree. So, I mean, I can take this whole recommendation to Cabinet, and as I say, I can simply use that as a way to reflect the debate that we had this evening. And I'm more than happy to do that. Lindsay, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, just if I can help. Cabinet is tomorrow, and so we are in a position where if you want to say anything formally, words on paper as a recommendation or a comment to Cabinet, we would need to agree the wording with you here and now. And even if that takes a few minutes for members to draft what wording they would like to say. Alternatively, you can not send a written recommendation, but you can go along, Chair, and just give a flavour of the discussion that you've had. And that is something that also often happens at Cabinet, if you would like to.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, I mean, I was sort of hinting at that, but I thought that also had to come with some form of recommendation that, sort of pinned, if you like, that discussion. Is that not the case?
Chair, through you, I mean, you can draft a comment to Cabinet, and you can put it in writing as well. I think they're quite open to receiving views in from overview and scrutiny chairs. But yeah, you could do it either way. I can't speak for Cabinet on exactly what they would be willing to accept. But I think it's up to the committee about what they feel they need to put down in writing, if they do need to at all. And we'll support you with the wording as much as we can, but we can't suggest anything and make assumptions about what you want to say.
No, of course. Thank you very much. Just have Richard wants to come in.
Yeah, I suppose if anybody, I can speak more for Cabinet for what they like to accept, and I'm pretty sure that is something that they would accept, because yeah, we do always give the opportunity for chairs to speak at that, and I'm always pleased to hear children's matters being talked about wherever, because it actually it helps my arguments as well. So you know.
So we do need a form of words. So what is it that you want me to reflect? Yes, I know. To Cabinet tomorrow morning. As I said, I've already suggested certainly the final sentence of the recommendation that we have in front of us, reflecting that we have an ongoing concern as well. What else do we have? We have Olivia's point around strengthening inclusive practice, but that was more a negation of what is already in this recommendation. So I'm not sure where that takes us, and I think Emily would like to say something.
I was just going to say that ongoing concern piece, that for me, that was the piece I wanted to get across when we were talking about the recommendation. And I think you picked that up, and I have full faith in you, Chair, that you will do a great job tomorrow in giving Cabinet a flavour of the discussion we've had. So thank you.
Olivia, how do you feel? Okay. In that case, I'm left with the overall wording, aren't I? Is that what people want me to take? Pearl, please.
The impact of exclusions later down the line is on paragraph 44, which if we can reduce this, we can reduce future demand on social care, youth justice and post-16 support. And I think it would be helpful if that was highlighted. Yeah, paragraph 44. I don't know if it's on the same page.
Yeah, page 76.
Okay.
Oh no, that's 44. Oh, it's the first bullet point on 44. Improved outcomes for vulnerable.
Financial implications.
Is the committee happy with using? Is it just the first? We could use all.
I think
we could use all the bullet points. Emily.
So I think we have ongoing concerns because we appreciate the impact of trying to ensure that the inclusive environment, reduce the rate of exclusions because of the wider impact that such a high number of exclusions has. So it sort of all can be embedded in the same sentence potentially.
So we have ongoing concerns because we appreciate the impact. Was it the impact that exclusions have? And detrimental impact. Okay, as highlighted in the report. I
think we should recognise the good work that's going on, but understand.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We recognise the work that's underway. Anything else from anyone? No? And then do we want to use these 3 bullet points to highlight the, because I mean, they're in the context of potential savings. However, yeah, but it does cover, I mean, it says it includes improved outcomes for vulnerable pupils, you know, reducing future demand on social care, youth justice. Okay, the work that's underway.
Working, where there's a better phrase there, and also there are the budgetary implications as highlighted in the report.
Yeah, because I was going to say something like what I said earlier, that if you do it right for the child, you also make savings, essentially. And then because I do quite like these bullets, it has to be said. So yes, yeah. So we could say the committee discussed, or no, the committee agreed that our primary focus is improved outcomes for our children. Or is that an awful way of putting it? Improved outcomes for our children. But this also will likely bring savings, budgetary savings. No? Or do we not want to put it in that way?
I think it does need to be acknowledged because it's important, like, primarily the child, well, probably the
Yeah.
child, but yes, these are.
Okay. And then and then I can use those 3 bullet points or bits of them. Okay? Is that all right? Do you have it?
So I've got the committee appreciates the detrimental impact of exclusions, which were highlighted in the report. We recognise the work that is underway. The committee agreed that our primary focus is improved outcomes for our children, but this will also likely bring budgetary savings.
Yeah. And then each sort of such as,
With the
and
bullet
then
points.
the 3 bullet points.
Okay.
Is everybody happy with that? Sorry, is everybody happy with that? Thank you. That's good work.
Lindsay's hand up.
Oh, we have Lindsay.
Just want to be absolutely clear. So this is being written up and sent to Cabinet. Is that the will? Because that's what I will do right now, and so that it is published for you tomorrow. So I've got the wording that Sinead's just read back, but I'd like to be really clear.
So the indication from the committee is that I share it verbally. But I mean, I don't think there's really any difference, to be perfectly honest, as we've written something. I mean, it just sits in that bit at the beginning, doesn't it, of Cabinet, where it's, as it were, feedback from scrutiny chairs. So, Lindsay, it can go there as a the recommendations sit at the beginning of the agenda, don't they, for the, yeah.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, they do come at the start of the agenda. I just would like to know either way what the committee would like to do.
I'm not really aware that there's a huge difference. I think we'll send it in writing. It's an important paper, and it's a paper that I know. Well, it's exercised all of us this evening. So I think it's correct that we reflect that back to the Cabinet. Thank you. So just to say, I'm aware of the time. It's difficult for me to judge how long the home to school transport paper will take. We could take a short break or we could power through. I'm in everyone's hands. If somebody says to me they'd like a comfort break, we shall have a comfort break. We're going to have a short comfort break. I'm going to say 5 minutes because that means it will be 10. Thank you very much. Excuse me, and welcome back. We are moving on to item 10, which is the home to school transport paper. And I'm going to invite Tanya to present that, please. Before we do that, though, I just want to read something out. Excuse me. Just to remind committee members that before we start our discussions, that if there's anything that you wish to discuss, which is actually from the content of the confidential appendix 1, then I will need to move us into exempt session and use the proper resolution in order to do that. So please bear that in mind with your discussions. If you feel, and I suppose I hope that we can conduct the discussion without doing that in the interests of public awareness so that everyone can hear what we say. But if we do need to move, then just flag that to me. Thank you. Over to you, please, Tanya.
Thanks very much. Yes, so this is in the context of national pressures in the provision of our homeschool transport function. This report presents the findings of a review undertaken by an external provider, and the purpose is then to identify both strategic and operational opportunities that support the development of independent travel options. The recommendation is to agree formal tendering exercise to commission an external provider to implement a phased delivery of change proposals, and those proposals are detailed in the report. And it summarises that that's at a cost of 1.5 million and could generate ongoing cost savings in the region of 3 million net of the resource required. I just wanted to say that the homeschool transport function is delivered across services in BCP, so the budget and policy and the assessment of eligibility sits within education and children's services, and then the operational day-to-day management of the homeschool transport, the service, the transport, the day-to-day rests with our passenger assistant team in the Environment Directorate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's over to the committee for questions and comments, please. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to ask about the report was, has any consideration been given to bringing the service wholly or partially in-house? I understand that another council in this region has done this, maybe Bristol, I wouldn't swear to it, where they use a fleet of EVs that can also be used by other staff in other departments, but that's beside the point. The main point being, has any consideration been given to bringing the service wholly or partially in-house?
Yes, I think it's important to say that prior to this review, we have had some success in reviewing the homeschool transport function and achieving some savings and managing demand for homeschool transport, but that can only go so far. And the reason I mention how the function is delivered across those services is that really goes to the complexity of the task at hand. An external provider is able to span the spread of those directorates, working both with the passenger assistant team and, of course, our admissions homeschool transport team, and pull them together in a way that requires a focused, intense activity that's full-time and is beyond the capacity of those teams that would contribute to an in-house review. So I think the external provider in this case will help us to achieve a robust phased plan much quicker than we could through a much improved coordinated effort spanning those directorates much more effectively than we could. And I think that whilst we can't guess what the outcome of the tender will be, many of these firms have got tried and tested success at delivering the projected outcomes that they identify through a range of opportunities, and those opportunities also align with opportunities across England that have already been delivered. So there's no guesswork, it's experienced consultant travel professionals, and they'd be working across the council to do that. So I think it's more efficient. I think it will. There's a level of robustness in their estimates in terms of the delivery of those savings, and I think the capacity that they bring is far exceeds what we could do. I just wanted to say the 5 critical building blocks that's outlined in the report that's necessary to deliver the change talks about that investment in resources and an investment in systems as well, and the political and officer buy-in that we'd need to achieve this. So this is a major transformation piece that, as you say, is beyond the capacity of the existing teams whilst they do the day-to-day.
Thank you for that. I get what you're saying. It'd be interesting to see how the other South West Council, who I can't recall who it is, get on, why they feel they can bring it in-house where we feel we can't, because there's always, with the private provider, there's always that larger profit element that we have to be aware of. And developing the skills and resources in-house would be a longer term solution, in my humble opinion, but I hear clearly what you're saying. Thank you.
I think I just wanted to follow up on that a bit, because I suppose it was the fact that we only had 2 options on the paper, really. You know, it's the do the external or do nothing, which felt like it is very much a binary choice, and doesn't present us with any kind of sort of options appraisal of what in-house might have looked like, or any information to think about, or to make our own assessment of what other options were considered, getting to that binary choice of external or do nothing.
Yeah, and I'd say that many of the opportunities that are set out in this report are very much focused on promoting that independence and those independent skills for travel. So it's very difficult then to say that we're going to deliver one proposal over another. They very much interlink. They're complementary. Assessment, say, of single person journeys and moving away from door-to-door transport and the promotion of personal travel budgets. You know, they're not necessarily singular activities or proposals. It's more complex than that. So I think if we are to achieve a greater level of independence and promote those independent skills among our young people, we need to levy a range of transport and travel options that's available to our children and families, and we've got in there independent travel training, we've got policy changes, we've got language and sentiment around the policy to manage better parental responsibility. So there's a lot in here that play to the same theme, and that's really about managing our demand, ensuring that our children are prepared for adulthood, and also, of course, follow the best of what's out there across England in terms of practice and what other authorities are doing to manage their homeschool transport function sustainably. You'll note that the budget at the moment it sits at 13.8, and so the outturn last year, and the budget this year at 16.4. So we are facing, as part of those national pressures I'd mentioned, significant increases, and I think independent travel and a focus on those independent skills is a package of proposals, and that package of proposals very much forms this 3-year phased delivery plan.
I'm not sure that answered the question. I think it gave a good outline of why we were doing this. So I think part of this work is bringing in the skills and the expertise that we do not have in-house. So we're bringing in that breadth of experience and utilising their skills and abilities. And part of the role of this team would be also to leave a legacy, because what we don't want is someone coming in, doing something, going away again, and then we just tip into a similar scenario that we're already in. And so part of this journey is also investing their time with our staff to actually upskill them and equip them. So that's part and parcel of this whole work. I think at this point, if we went out to recruit the skills and abilities to do this work, so if we did that in-house, I don't think we would have the structure in-house to be able to enable those people to do that job. So they would come in as a team, and the team would fall away as they've put certain things in place over a period of time, and they would be upskilling our staff along that journey. And I guess it's about using the best in class that's out there to assist in us in delivering that, rather than us try to bring some bits and bobs of the best in class, and then us not having the infrastructure to actually know what it is we want them to do or how to deliver. So it's purchasing that expertise, and I think it's a valid point about should we have had another option to explore that. But I think this is the fastest way of actually us delivering it. I think we would have taken a longer period of time if we hadn't. So it's kind of almost like pump priming it. And as you see, some of the staff fall away, the staff that are incoming fall away as they're training our staff. Mark.
Hi. How do we ensure there's not, with an independent provider, is what I'm understanding, that there's not a disconnect between the transport provider and our SEND teams? And is there going to be an ongoing dialogue, or how would that work?
Yeah, I mean, we work very closely together, and it's a very successful working relationship. You know, we meet regularly with the Environment Directorate, and as you say, you know, we complement each other in many ways. They respond to day-to-day parental requests and inquiries, and we sort out the eligibility aligned to a home to school transport policy that's approved and determined, and we work you know, very robustly to that criteria in the assessment of applications. So I think we just continue on with that strong partnership and way that we work. I think the opportunities set out in this report are sort of split between both of those directorates. So you've got the supply management side and the commissioning side in the passenger transport team, and then you've got the policy and the independent travel training sitting then within education. So they're all part of the same thing in terms of delivering on this function, and we just work very successfully together, and that will continue.
A two-way process as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
An example of that will be how we, going forward when we do have a full independent travel training scheme in place, will be how we utilise the annual reviews to support that and to make sure that we pick up early enough on children and young people who might benefit from that training, and that then forms part of their annual review and their planning going forward.
Ryan. Elliot, every time I second guess myself each way. It's ridiculous. I'm so sorry.
You'll get it by I mean, March. Um, I have a question on the phased delivery plan. So I spent quite a lot of time volunteering at a SEND school, and I see just how much of a lifeline the travel provisions are for getting these students into the schools. And I would be really worried about any changes to current provisions to the students who already have provisions. So it mentions aging through. Does that mean that there wouldn't be any changes to those, and they would kind of be untouched, and then it would be the new cohort of students that would be affected, or would current students be affected?
Yeah, so I think the option to age through means that you are helping your families with children who are receiving an eligibility for homeschool transport to benefit for a period of time, given that they may have made their decision about which school to choose based on the policy you had in operation at that time. So it is one option for you to then lessen the impact on those families by allowing any new changes to policy to come into effect for the new cohort joining in that particular academic year, and then the existing cohorts aging through. So that is an option. I think it's too early at this stage to say that that's what we'll absolutely do. There's a lot of detail to be worked through, but it is a way that you can certainly help those families continue to travel to school in a way that means that we're, promoting that attendance, ensuring that they can get their children to school. It's not a cliff edge. I think it's really important to say none of these changes about creating a cliff edge. It's about a transition to a model that's sustainable, that gives our children the skills that they need. And I think that's really important, and we make sure that the decisions and proposals and the opportunities we consider with the child at the centre of those proposals.
Sorry, trying to make notes at the same time. Thank you. I don't think this takes us into the exempt report, but sorry, if you could just outline for me, because I've read this and it's still not quite clear to me. What are we actually buying with that 1.5 million? What does that investment get us? Sort of, how is that, well, almost broken down, if you like?
Yes, it is. There is some more detail provided in that Appendix 1. Yeah.
Are you able to go there, or?
There's when you look at the report, there's a human resources implication set out under paragraph 36, and it says that that successful implementation requires a few things, and that goes to those critical building blocks I'd mentioned. So strong leadership, clear governance, additional permanent team resources. So you can see that it sets out 2 members of staff to deliver some of the supply and commissioning proposals, and then a further 2 members of staff to deliver on the independent travel training offer. But what we're talking about here is a raft of changes that require system enhancements, refining, enhancing our communication, but also route optimization, and that's where those systems come into play. So I think it is on the whole staffing, but it is about a changed way of operating, including how we use data and that access to performance management data to inform decision making. So I think it's a mix of systems and human resources. Yeah.
Thank you. And it was actually one of the things I mentioned earlier about I like our IT systems being sort of efficient and talking to each other, and because I know, for example, in the history of BCP, we've had the situation where Pool's on one system, Bournemouth's on another, and that sort of legacy has been really, really tricky. So are we literally, and I think you said we use Synergy, are we continuing with Synergy, or are we using, I mean, are we using, buying a new system with, you know, is there IT implications within that 1.5 million, for example, or are we using the systems we've got and we're just doing them better, or how are we doing that?
Okay, it's about developing different systems. So when you think about transport, it's things like logistics, it's about route optimization, and so it's those types of systems. So it's not necessarily those recording systems like Synergy and Mosaic that we use. It's more about those more efficient and effective route optimization, knowing where they're going, how many passengers. It's that kind of information, and so that's making sure that those systems are more robust, and so we know. And then there's a future proofing in terms of how we use that going forward. So it's mainly resources and systems into those type arrangements.
Thank you. And so what will then be the acid test of that 1.5 million having been well spent? I know we've got a schedule of like savings and what have you, but I mean, I can't quite remember where that is in the paper. There we go. 26. Yeah, what sort, can you give me an idea of sort of what sorts of things add up to those savings, please?
So it'll be it will be things like recommissioning the way we commission our transport and our cars, where they go. Are we efficient in terms of those routes? In terms of enabling more independent travel, enabling maybe different ways that we optimize routes as we go along, how we might do, if we think about other local authorities, they've done things like collection points, and so there's a group of children waiting to be collected. So all of those kind of things, direct payments, and so some of those things, so by delivering it in a different way, by delivering it in a way that optimizes children and young people in terms of getting, by doing those things, that will create the efficiencies in terms of what we're looking at.
And the if I may, the measurables in terms of the children and young people will be a gradation in terms of the level of independence that's right for them. So for some it might be moving to travelling with one other person rather than travelling in a solo vehicle, which is an important part of becoming more independent. For others, it might be being able to wait at a particular pickup point and be on a multiple occupancy vehicle. And then for others, it might be about being able to get from home to school independently on public transport or another mode of transport. So it will be tailored to the needs of the individual children and young people, but we'll be able to track that in terms of the impact that that has had for them through their annual review processes and through what the data will tell us about that movement on that gradation of different types of independent travel.
Sorry, forgive me, because I'm just working this through in my head. So you sent, Kathy, in your answer, you centered quite heavily on the sort of route optimization, and then you talked about sort of like not clustering, but you know, different drop-off points, and this is kind of clustering for some people. They might, 3 or 4 people might come to the same point to be picked up, for example. Forgive me, but that seems to me to be a sort of an algorithmic response solution, in as much as that's wrapped up in the IT. So I suppose I'm sort of left sitting here thinking, can we not just buy that package, that sort of IT package, and upskill our current staff and maybe take on a couple of others, rather than hand this over to an external company for £1.5 million? You know, I don't wish to oversimplify, because I realise it's fiendishly complex doing this stuff, but if a big part of it is actually being done by a computer, which I assume the route planning, the route optimization is, can we not just sort of buy that IT package?
we can do that, but this is multi-layered in terms of all of the different aspects that the proposal is making, and they do intertwine with each other. And I think what we want to avoid doing is only delivering piecemeal around the edges of that. And so if we can use the investment to deliver the whole thing together, we think that's actually a better and more efficient use of the funding than splitting it up and potentially not having as great an impact, and further down the line costing us more money anyway.
Yeah, because I think you can do the route optimization, but with route optimization comes a bit of a shakedown in terms of the suppliers that you're using. Now, a lot is made in this report of the competition element in terms of the suppliers, and really stimulating that in a way that then brings the council greater value for money, improved a range of suppliers and flexibility. So if you're route optimizing, you've absolutely got to do that in tandem with your commissioning and stimulating the market. Because, and I think the other thing to say is that can't leave it to the system really, because it's very important that we're looking at each traveller and each child as they and their journey, and those journey times need to be kept to within the sort of statutory journey time that ensures that children arrive in the morning ready to learn. And a route optimization package may go some way in giving you the answer, but not in its entirety. So I think, to think it might be a systems thing, and in isolation to other things is obviously, an oversimplification, as Lisa says.
So we are buying that wide range of expertise and knowledge, as it were. Okay. Sorry, I have Olivia, if that's all right.
Talking about that and about that optimization of the different and making sure our routes are working, and I'm looking at the group safe pickup. I sit on the appeals transport appeals, and we see that things aren't optimized as much as they should, they can be, and we've got routes that have only got 2 children that could have 5 children. We could be saving that, which is great, and obviously we want to make that efficiency. My concern is, again, we come back to children first, and we want to make sure that actually we're not just being efficient, we're ensuring those children. I'm sitting here and I don't want it to just be about that saving. I want to make sure that how are we mitigating for the fact that actually we might optimize that route, but that might actually in the long term not be so good for those children, and we're back to those vulnerable children again, the most vulnerable in society. And I'm not saying we're not doing it, but I just want to make sure we've got that in place too.
So just to reassure you, route optimization is something which happens over and over and over again. It isn't just done once and then that's it, and bad luck to anybody further down the line where that doesn't work. The whole purpose of it, and one of the beauties of that element of it being systematized, is that you can then keep rerunning that based on the changes of children that are coming through, the changes of need that are coming through, and so it is a responsive way of doing things. And actually the opposite is true. If we only stick with a set of routes and don't update them on a regular basis, then that's what does what you're describing. This will be more efficient, but also better in terms of responding to what the need is at any given time.
As a follow-up to that, can I just quickly ask, are we again, will we get to the point, and we're not at that point yet, I'm not sure, that we will be discussing this with families and the impact, the changes on the families, and how we make sure they kind of coming along for the journey with us?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that a lot of this work is actually very forensic and child focused, and just sort of to drum that is about when you're appraising single passenger journeys. It's really starting with the needs of those children and ensuring that we are absolutely encouraging, promoting that full participation and attendance at school. So that's the sort of premise on which we would forensically reassess single passenger journeys, say for instance. This has to be sustainable and manageable. And of course, we've got to remember too that the council has a number of statutory duties to deliver on, and children are eligible on a statutory basis. We do have discretion, and we exercise that discretion through the appeals process that you mentioned. Sorry, forgot the second part of your question then. Parents and carers, sorry, yes. So we've been engaging with our parent carer forum to understand, what is at first blush, if you like, the response to a proposal from the council to promote independent skills and to make associated changes in our policy and our operations to promote those independent skills. The feedback was limited because it's early days, but I'd say what I'd reassure you of is that if we are to press ahead with the 3-year phase delivery plan, that at the centre of that would be that engagement with our parent and carers to say, how can we engage meaningfully to design and co-design services that deliver for our children and young people? I mean, that's what we're here for. If our homeschool transport function doesn't support that, we will sort of pack up and go home. So yeah, very much at the heart of that. And it's not as a consultation, just want to make that really clear as well, that co-designing, ensuring that parents and children have a voice in what this homeschool transport function looks like and how we can deliver it. And of course, we've got a lot to learn from and draw on in terms of that best practice from across the country. And what we anticipate is that we'll develop a policy and policy wording that our parent and carers can get behind and can support.
Again, yeah.
Sorry, Rich, I'm not trying to cut you off again, the second time. Just asking for a bit of reassurance. I think I've got it there, but it's certainly important on some of the routes with some of the young people involved that A might not be able to travel with B, or there's whatever issue, that there's a flexibility within the system that even though it's more efficient to have the bus going this route, it might need to do a detour because of the nature of the transport users. I think I've got that, but
yeah, absolutely. When we're trying to understand what the makeup of a particular mode of transport will be in terms of the children travelling, we've got to very carefully assess and consider the needs of those children. And you need to ensure that it's safe. And likewise with the journey and the routing, it needs, as I've said, we absolutely need to ensure that the journey times are kept to a minimum and that the children are arrived in a well-regulated state and ready to learn. So yeah, it's a very important part, I'd say, of that process of assessing the route optimization, single person journeys versus, transport where you may have 2, 3, 4 or 5 travellers.
And that's why the annual review process is such an important part of the join up in the work, because that's looking at that individual child, assessing and reviewing what they would be capable of for their next stage of development, and also what might not be appropriate for them, and that would then get fed through in terms of information that would go back through into the homeschool transport team.
Richard, you wanted to come in? Oh no, I've got Oliver, and I am going to go to the committee first, and I've also got Councillor Canavan. Okay, I'm going to come to, right, Oliver, then Dwayne, and then I'll go to Patrick.
Thank you. Have we explored commissioning these services in conjunction with neighbouring authorities as well, such as Dorset or Somerset or Wiltshire, just to try and benefit from, you know, larger economies of scale type bid from multiple vendors?
This might be an answer to a question that we might want to take away. I wouldn't want to get it wrong on behalf of our Environment Directorate. I would say no, but I'd like to take that one away. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, I'm just looking at the comparisons here with so it's cost per mile. We've got the comparison here with Somerset, with saloons. It's 2.14, and then down at the bottom here we're 890. Is that so? Is that?
Sorry,
That's
what
that
page are you
pence?
on?
That's 104.
Is that in the
So
exempt
that's cost
report?
per mile. So
Is that in the exempt report?
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oops.
So yeah, we had a warning about we're not going into the exempt report unless we go into exempt session. So do you require us to go into the exempt session?
Yeah, so I'd like to ask this question then. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. In which case, so I don't know why I took my glasses off. I can't see the print without them. So under section 100A 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 in part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in withholding the information outweighs such interest in disclosing the information. So we've got a question that wishes us to go into exempt session. That is a motion that I need proposing and seconding, and then we will have to vote on it as to whether or not we do go into exempt session. So does anybody wish to propose that? I need a proposer and seconder, please.
I'll
If
propose
that's
it.
what people want. Okay, so you're proposing. Thank you. I've got a proposal from Dwayne. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
This is awkward.
Yes, it is. So in the interest of debate, I'm prepared to second it, if I'm allowed to do that, because then we will go to a vote. Okay, so that will be the clear direction of the committee. So I am prepared to second it. So we will need to take a vote on whether or not we go into exempt session, so that Dwayne can ask his question. I'm not in any way trying to inhibit you asking your question. It's just that questions can also be asked offline as well. But if it's a question you definitely want to have aired at this committee, is that correct?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll go to the vote. So all those in favour of going into exempt session, please raise your hand. Okay, so we've got 6. Those against?
The online ones.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Who have we got online? Nobody's online. Who's voted?
Toby's there.
They can't vote online.
No.
Oh, they can't vote. Sorry,
Yeah.
of course they can't.
All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, so that's carried. So we'll suspend the live feed and go into exempt session. Thank you. Thank you. So that those questions that needed to be asked in exempt session have been asked, and I'm Olivia.
Just a very quick one, just for me to kind of look at how it's going to work better. So in a recent appeals committee, we were discussing a transport issue and with regards to a taxi, and we could see that there was potentially space in a taxi that already had children in it, but we couldn't work out if it would be viable, if it would to do that, and they would have to go away and look at it and then come back. Would this system mean that actually straight away, would it give us a quicker access to that, saying actually that child, you know, that would be a quicker way to do it? I mean, I'm looking at, you know, making it more running smoother. Is that something that this would do? Can you?
I think the answer is going to be a bit frustrating because I'm going to say possibly, but I don't think we could definitely say that we know.
Yeah.
Looking at that streamlining of it and making it work, you know, kind of more efficiently, because it is quite frustrating at the moment when you have that possibility and you can't come back to it.
Thank you. And I'm conscious that we have Councillor Canavan online. He's not a member of the committee. It's up to me whether or not I take the question. He stuck with us all night. So I'm inclined to take his question. Yeah. Over to you, Patrick. Patrick, we can't hear you. Please start again.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair. The question I wanted to ask was, some time ago now, I had the opportunity and was invited to visit a centre in Christchurch in Bargate, which from memory I think was somehow linked to the Linwood School. But this was funded through the council, and basically what that centre was doing was training young people to be able to travel independently. So when I went there, they explained to me that this is exactly what they were doing. Effectively, they were taking young people from a position where they were not able, for whatever reason, to be able to get in a taxi, even with a parent, to a position where they could travel independently. So they went through, you know, different phases of that, whether they could firstly travel with a parent, secondly whether they could travel then with somebody who they knew, and then, you know, progress onwards to be able to travel independently from home to you know, to wherever it is they wanted to go. And my memory of that was that was funded through the council. So, and I'm assuming that funding has stopped, because when I passed there, it's not there anymore, but it had like a shop frontage to it. So my point really is, if we were able to do that, then why can't we do it now? Why can't we facilitate organisations and schools like this and staff who are working there to do it, to train young people ourselves? Why are we paying £1.5 million to an external organisation in a situation where really we ought to be able to do this ourselves? There might be all sorts of frills and bells and whistles on this, but fundamentally, seems to me what we're trying to do or hoping to do is to be able to allow young people to travel independently. And now that's a journey; it doesn't happen overnight. But all of this seems to be going to an external organisation, and despite the debate, Chair, I am still not clear what we are going to get for that money at the end of the process. Are more young people going to be? Are more young people going to be able to get to wherever they want to be independently as a result of this exercise? Because I can't see it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know that I'm aware of the programme that you're describing, but I am aware of the fact that, of course, schools do, that our special schools do try and provide support to those young people who would like it, in terms of helping them with their independent travel, particularly our older young people. But we when we're talking about the funding that we're advocating using, it is not just to deliver an independent travel training program, it's to deliver a whole suite of whole scale reform to the way that we do all of this system and processes. And as Kathy described earlier, it's a pump priming exercise that will lead to a sustainable approach. And that will be working closely with our schools, but we can't just expect and rely on our schools to deliver independent travel training, for example, on their own without any additional support. And we want that to work in our mainstream schools and our special schools in terms of growing that package of support. So please be assured that it's about a whole package, and if that's not clear enough, then maybe we need to go back and make that clearer in terms of exactly how that funding is going to be utilised, or the proposal for it to be utilised.
Are there any other questions? Oh, I'm so sorry, Tanya.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to say that, you know, stimulating the market, the focus on more competition, you know, being smarter about how we work within a market. I think that goes for working with our schools. So where there are schools that are willing to engage and offer this sort of independent travel training offer, then we would absolutely engage with those schools as part of our a part of a mixed economy, really, of our independent travel training offer. And I think that's really important, because with the resource that we've talked about in the covering report, that will only go so far. So we absolutely want to work with all of our schools to maximise the offer and to reach as many children and young people as we can, and to provide the opportunity for independent travel training. And with the resource that we've set out here, that's not going to be that extensive. So it is about working with those schools.
Do I have any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry, Richard. You are quite right. You did indicate.
Yeah, and it's just because it just so happens, of course, I'm presenting this to the cabinet tomorrow, so I've already got some notes here that I was going to use there, and I just felt well, first off, it's really useful listening to this debate now. I know you'll be there tomorrow. I'm not going to steal your thunder and use this because, but it's actually crystallising some of the things that I know I was going to say. Just a couple of sort of things that might help with the understanding. Looking at the numbers, we have 1,639 passenger be transported per day. That is children, young people from their home to school. Now, you know, when I first started thinking about this, I pictured getting a map and putting dots and drawing lines between them. But you can imagine how complex that would be. And of course, most of these journeys start within BCP. I think probably all of them, a lot of them don't end up within BCP. And then if you add the time into that, it's a three-dimensional thing, isn't it? Because you've got to get the right child or young person from the right place at the right time. He was talking about using software to do it. Yeah, you could probably do that with software, but of course, I'm going to start my conversation tomorrow by putting children and young people first, as I always do, and getting the travel training, which is what we've just been discussing about. And I don't feel that the software can do that, because you need to look at the young person. So that was just oh yeah. And one thing I did pull from the report is it does say that BCP at the moment performs similarly to other progressive authorities, and it also this praise for the officers within BCP for the work they've already done. So I do feel I'd like us to recognise that it isn't just a new thing; it's something which is already had work done on it, and this is just a way of moving it to the next level.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. So the recommendation that we have, or the thing that we are asked to consider, it is recommended to Cabinet that we agree to tender an external provider to deliver a transformation project over 3 years with a total cost of £1.5 million, funded by the flexible use of capital receipts, to deliver service improvements, and by the end of the project, ongoing savings in SEND school transport projected at £3 million, net of additional resource requirement. I'm going to take a vote on this. And so I'd like to see an indication from committee members as to those who support that recommendation, please. Okay, thank you. Any against? And there's one abstention. Okay, thank you very much. So that's the end of our substantive items of business. We have some items for information. Unless anyone's got something burning through their brain, I wasn't going to take anything on the items for information. As I said earlier, questions can always be taken offline to officers. Okay, thank you. Which moves us on to our portfolio holders update. Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can because so first off, last meeting I had a question from Adam Safianos which I couldn't fully answer. Just to remind everybody, Adam asked of the current alternative provision placements, what proportion is being fulfilled through an online provision? And I said that we aren't able to currently report on this due to some providers offering online and face-to-face provision or a mixture of the two. We're setting up methods on how we can capture this going forward and aiming to implement this by October half term. Now, I've had an update from the Commissioning Resources and Quality Services, and I want to try to finish off this answer. However, we're not there yet. It seems there is an issue on our education case management system, which is preventing us from capturing this accurately for all our providers, as there's a limit to the number of providers we can add the options on. We weren't aware of this previously, as the number of providers was less. Now we have so many different providers, this has become an issue. We have escalated it to the system supplier, but at present they have not come back with us with an update to is this is possible or not. If it isn't possible, we'll have to look at it on an alternative option to capture this, which may be possible when we change to Synergy Case Management, which we mentioned earlier on in the meeting next year. Apologies, it's not better news, but hopefully we can see that we're onto it. Ofsted mention it every time. Well, they've been and they've gone and taking CQC with them. So our inspection happened from the 3rd of November until last Friday, the 21st. For those who are not directly involved, it's difficult to quite understand the amount of work and input involved in all these inspections. It's an order of magnitude bigger than the ILACS inspection, I would say. I'm surprised the officers are still standing today. I'd like to thank the Children's Services team, our health and education partners, and everyone who was interviewed, filled in feedback forms and questionnaires, those who spent hours preparing and downloading the data, the parents, the carers, the children, young people who were involved in the process. I was there when the team received the initial feedback last Friday, and I can share with you that the inspectors were very grateful for the welcome that they received. And I know you will want a bit more, but I would have to kill you if I told you. The first draft report will be with us on Friday the 5th. There's then opportunity for Kathy and the team to make comments about the report. 10 days, if I remember rightly, that you have. And then alterations will be made before the report is officially published. Now, they said before Christmas, although the lead inspector confused themselves, didn't they? Oh, got an update on it.
I have got an update on that.
Okay.
I'm terribly sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry. We do have an update on that. They were proposing exactly as you've described, Councillor Burton, the draft report on the 5th, comments back 10 days later. However, due to the way that the policy team in Ofsted CQC works, there's a cut-off point at which they're able to accept reports and timeliness for QA. We add a little sprinkle of Christmas and New Year. And so I was emailed by the quality assurance inspector at the end of Friday, and I apologise, wasn't here yesterday, so I wasn't able to give Councillor Burton this information. And they have said that it will move into end of January for a draft report, and we will not get the final published version until probably early February. Yes, and that's exactly what my face did, because it feels an extremely long time to wait for everybody. But and just to be clear, that is the reason. It's nothing to do with what they found. It's nothing to do with any comments or anything we've had them. It's purely the way that they manage their workload over Christmas period. And they've also got to, if you think about it, they've got to go through Ofsted, DFE and CQC in terms of that quality assurance. It's not just dealing with just Ofsted. And so, and I apologise, Councillor Burton, I'll make sure that email gets to you. Thank you.
You see how quickly you become out of date, can't you? You know, you blink, you go to bed, and what happens? Somebody goes in and makes you out of date. So I was going to say, I think it will be just after Christmas. But remember, this isn't an outstanding to inadequate rating, but one of three statements, which we often refer to as 1, 2 and 3, 1 being the best, 3 being the worst. We were at 3 last time, which is described basically as systematic failings. We'll see how we'll do this time. I'm sure that they will be fair with their reporting, that this is all we can hope. On other topics, I do talk about school visits. These are school visits I did since the last meeting. These are in reverse order. So Court Hill Primary School, Merley First, Bearwood Primary School, Avonwood Primary School and Bethany Church of England Junior School. All really interesting visits. I had great conversations with the heads and got to see some schools, and I always talk about SEND and care expense young people when I go there. Also, this is in the right order, starting at the other. I've been to the Youth Homelessness Action Planning Workshop, Dingley's Promise Pool site opening, which was great. I hope you all saw me on the socials with the bear. Opening of the esports suite and music studio at Portfield Post 16 in Christchurch. I got to jointly press the button that opened it. Ochre Academy opening. That's a new building, which is a great building. It's you know, the difference between that and the old building is fantastic. The Foster Carers Awards evening, and it's remarkable how much time and dedication that our foster carers give to our children and young people. Star Awards, which is always a great event to go to for care experience young people, and Councillor McEnroe is not online. I just wanted to thank her for all the work she did there, because I know she was there all day. Yeah, I just checked. It's and it was very, very much appreciated. Also, Linwood. Linwood Post 16 Skills Centre opening. We mentioned that, the former Ted Webster Family Centre. I would pass on the thanks to you know the support that this committee and council gave, because we dedicated £1.5 million to that to make a difference. What the opening was it Tuesday, where they opened the Monday before? The students there were beside themselves with joy. It was great to see. It was, look what people have done for us. You know, we've gone from this place which was a basement to a really nice place. It's capable of taking 60 students. They had 30 before. It's up to 32 by the time the week after. I say it was a really nice event. I did manage to meet young one who was being trained to shake hands, but he decided pulling my beard was actually the way forward, which, you know, it didn't come off in his hand, which is always a result. Just to let you know, Cabinet tomorrow we've talked about, just to know that it's happening. So that the homeschool transport and youth justice service plan is going to Cabinet tomorrow. I know you looked at that quite a long time ago. And Cabinet on the 17th of December, the dedicated schools grant, high needs expenditure forecast. That was discussed at school forum yesterday, which I couldn't go to because I was at a health and wellbeing board strategy workshop. But just in case you're aware, they are coming to Cabinet soon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. Any questions or comments to Richard? Resist the urge to think I just want to go home just for a few more minutes. I'm really sorry. Okay, thank you very much. So the final item on our agenda then is the work plan. And we do need to note the work plan in its current form, but I believe Lindsay has a few comments for us. Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just very quickly to say that we are looking to do some annual work programming with you all in the new year. So that will be coming up. And also to flag that earlier in your agenda under the information item, there was a data toolkit item. I just wanted to say that that was for the committee to adopt. So I just want to double check that you're happy to adopt that. And what we'll do is write that into your work programme reports as a link, and it's a self-serve sort of tool so that you can access data more easily. So I just wanted to flag that before we finish the meeting, if that's okay.
Thank you. Sorry for skipping over that. Yes, to be honest, I thought we had adopted the toolkit. Are we happy to adopt the toolkit? Thank you very much. Okay, is that all, Lindsay? Thank you very much. And yes, we will be tackling work programming in the new year. It has not been forgotten. So in that case, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Yes, I apologise for the length of it, but I think that actually good work has been done. We knew that they were meaty reports, and I think we tackled them well, and we gave them the consideration that they individually needed. So thank you very much for that, and good night.